başlatmak üzere Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nden, Chicago Üniversitesi'nden Profesör Doktor Ufuk Akçelik'i Türkiye'de üniversiteler ve inovasyon konulu konuşmasını yapmak üzere davet ediyorum. Buyurun hocam.
Çok teşekkürler, sağ olun. Öncelikle böyle güzel bir konferans organize ettiğiniz için sizleri tebrik ederim ve beni de davet ettiğiniz için çok çok teşekkür ederim. Bugün size Türkiye'de üniversiteler ve inovasyon konusunda konuşmak istiyorum. Sizinle slaytlarımı paylaşayım. Görebiliyorsunuz diye tahmin ediyorum. Şu anda full screen olarak, değil mi?
Evet, şu an yaptık.
Tamam, harika. Tamam. Tekrar çok teşekkürler. Bildiğiniz üzere ben araştırmalarımı ekonomik büyümeyi anlamaya, çeşitli yönlerinden anlamaya çalışarak harcıyorum. Ve ekonomik büyüme de uzun vadede bildiğimiz üzere inovasyondan gerçekleşiyor. Şimdi inovasyon dediğimiz şey tabii ki bugün çok güzel konuşmalar oldu, çok güzel noktalara değinildi. İnovasyon dediğimiz şey tabii ki kompleks bir şey ve tam anlamamız lazım ki ona göre müdahaleler yapalım ve inovasyon üretmenin de tabii ki farklı boyutları var. Bunun finansman boyutu var, bunun eğitim boyutu var, bunun kolaborasyon, işbirliği boyutu var, gerekli sübvansiyonlar var vesaire. Bu detayları anlayıp ona göre kendimize politikalar geliştirmemiz gerekiyor. Ben de çalışma arkadaşlarımla birlikte uzun yıllardır, yaklaşık 17 yıldır bu konuda araştırmalarımı bildiğiniz üzere devam ettiriyorum. Yaptığımız çalışmalarda aslında geçen yıl yine OSTİM Üniversitesi'nde verdiğim bir konuşmada bahsetmiştim. Özellikle Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Merkez Bankası Yapısal Araştırmalar Genel Müdürlüğü ile buradaki araştırmacılarla birlikte çok kıymetli çalışmalar yaptık. Türkiye'deki rekabet ortamını, şirket rekabet ortamını, firmalar neye göre yatırım yapıyorlar, yapmıyorlarsa ne gibi eksiklikler var vesaire detaylı çalışmalar yaptık. Firmalar bu işin bir ayağı. Şimdi biz bir inovasyon ortamını anlamak istiyorsak inovasyonun sonuç olarak iki tane ayağı var. Bir, uygulamalı kısımlar, yani firmaların yaptıkları uygulamalı araştırmalar. Bir de bu işin temel araştırmalar kısmı var. Bu da üniversiteler ayağı. Aslında bizim özellikle Rektör Bey'in konuşmasında vurguladığı üzere üniversitelerle firmaların bu kadar dirsek temasında olmalarının ya da onların dirsek temasında olmalarını istememizin sebepleri var. Çünkü inovasyonun her zaman iki ayağı var. Dediğim gibi bir temel araştırmalar, ikincisi de uygulamalı araştırmalar kısmı. Temel araştırmalar kısmı üniversite tarafından yapılan kısım. Yani bunu daha önce de bazı örneklerden anlattım. Örneğin işte Maxwell denklemleri ya da Karater denklemleri olmasaydı biz radyonun icadı ya da işte naylonun icadı, o tarz icatlar ortaya çıkmayacaktı. Yani en önce matematiksel bazı inovasyonların olması gerekiyor ki daha sonradan bunun uygulamalı kısımlarını şirketler yapsın ve inovasyon yapsınlar. Dolayısıyla üniversitelerin çok önemli bir rolü var. Araştırmalarımın son birkaç projesinde özellikle Türkiye'deki üniversitelerin durumunu anlamaya çalıştık. Biraz o konulardan size bugün bahsetmek istiyorum. Daha önceki konuşmalarımda firmalardan konuşmuştuk. Bugün de üniversitelerden bahsetmek istiyorum. Tabii ki zaman kısıtlı olduğu için benden sonra da çok heyecanlı konuşmalar olacak. O yüzden tabii ki zaman kısıtlı olduğu için çok şeylerden konuşamayacağız ama bütün detaylardan yaptığımız çalışmaları artnotları.com'da bloglar halinde yayınlıyoruz. Dolayısıyla ilgilenenler için daha fazla detay artnotları.com adresinden bulunabilir. İsterseniz biraz daha detaya gireyim. Bugün çok kısaca iki makaleden bahsetmek istiyorum size, yakın zamanda tamamladığımız. Birincisi Doug Henley ve Nicholas Serrano Velarde ile yaptığımız bir çalışma. Yakın zamanda Review of Economic Studies'de yayınlanacak. Burada yaptığımız Fransa'daki inovasyon ortamının resmini çekmeye çalıştık. Ve çok enteresan gördüğümüz, mikro verilerle yaptığımız bu çalışmada çok enteresan gördüğümüz buluşlardan bir tanesi şu. Şimdi biz bir ülkenin ne kadar Ar-Ge'ye harcama yaptığına bakarsak işte GDP'lerin gayri safi milli hasılalarının %3'ünü ya da %4'ünü harcıyorlar. Ama aslında bu harcamanın, toplam harcamanın kırılımı burada çok enteresan. Bakarsanız detaylara, Bu harcamaların yaklaşık %50'lik kısmı basic yani temel araştırmalara gidiyor. %50'si applied yani uygulamalı araştırmalara gidiyor. Yani biz bu firmalara verdiğimiz sübvansiyonlarla ya da firmalardan çıkan patent miktarlarına falan baktığımız zaman genelde bu %50'lik uygulamalı kısmını tartışıyoruz. Ama aslında açıkta kalan ya da çok konuşmadığımız %50'lik bir de temel kısmı var. Yani temel araştırmalar kısmı var. Dolayısıyla bu yani iki ayakkabı gibi ya da bir arabanın iki tekerleği gibi, yani birisi olmadan diğeri olamaz. Complementarity dediğimiz, ekonomide complementarity dediğimiz basic temel araştırmalarla uygulamalı applied araştırmalar birbirinden ayırt edemeyeceğiniz iki kısım. Dolayısıyla biz bu yaptığımız tartışmalarda, politika tartışmalarında yapmamız gereken, odaklanmamız gereken konulardan bir tanesi de Türkiye'deki temel araştırmalara harcanan miktar ne kadar, yeterli mi, değilse ne gibi sıkıntılar var, bulunan temel bulgular uygulamalı halde firmalar tarafından kullanılabiliyor mu, kullanılamıyorsa firmalarla üniversiteleri nasıl bir dirsek temasına geçirebiliriz ki temel ve uygulamalı araştırmalar birbiriyle el ele gitsinler. Dolayısıyla bunları sorgulamamız gerekiyor. Şimdi biz bu ilk yaptığımız çalışmada gördüğümüz Fransa'da, Almanya'da yapılan harcamanın %50'si temel araştırmalara gidiyor. Dolayısıyla sorgulamamız gereken şeylerden bir tanesi Türkiye'de temel araştırmalar ne durumda diye. Dediğim gibi bu aslında üniversitelerin durumunu anlamaktan geçiyor ve bu yüzden de çok detaylı bir şekilde Türkiye'deki üniversitelerin durumunu anlamak için yaklaşık 1,5 senedir Türkiye Bilim Raporu adı altında bir çalışma yaptık Elif Özcan Tok'la birlikte. Biraz isterseniz zaman geriye kalan kısmında biraz size ondan bahsetmek istiyorum. Şimdi neden üniversiteler çok önemli? Aslında verilere baktığımız zaman bunun cevabı çok açık. Şimdi biz genelde böyle inovasyon, Ar-Ge ile ülkelerin zenginliğinin bir arada gittiğini biliriz zaten ama aslında olay sadece patent miktarı değil. Bu grafiğe baktığınız zaman örneğin yatay eksende kişi başına düşen bilimsel yayın sayısına bakıyoruz. Dikey eksende kişi başına düşen patent sayısı, yatay eksende de kişi başına düşen bilimsel yayın sayısı. Şimdi bu grafikte görüyorsunuz ki arada tabii ki ciddi pozitif bir ilişki var ama her bir ülke bu grafikte bir yuvarlak bir halkayla belirlenmiş ve halkaların büyüklüğü de kişi başına düşen gayri safi milli hasılayı gösteriyor. Yani halka ne kadar büyükse o ülkeler o kadar zengin. Ne görüyoruz? Genelde halkaların büyük olduğu ülkeler sağ üstte toplanmışlar. Yani hem kişi başına düşen patent sayısı yüksek hem de kişi başına düşen bilimsel makale sayısı yüksek. Dolayısıyla aslında bu resimden de enteresan bir sonuç ortaya çıkıyor. Zengin ülkelerin özellikleri hem uygulamalı inovasyonları, patentleri çok yüksek hem de temel araştırmaları çok yüksek. Yani kişi başına düşen yayın miktarları da çok yüksek. Dolayısıyla sormamız gereken soru sadece patent miktarı açısından ne durumdayız değil, aynı zamanda bilimsel yayın açısından ne durumdayız? Bunu da sorgulamamız gerekiyor. Şimdi Türkiye'ye baktığımız zaman tabii ki ne yazık ki o büyük halkalı ülkelerin arkasındayız iki boyutta da. Dolayısıyla inovasyon bazlı bir endüstriyel büyüme politikası geliştirmek için hem firmalara odaklanmamız gerekiyor hem de üniversitelerimize odaklanmamız gerekiyor ve oranın sıkıntıları ne onu anlayıp ona göre politikalar dizayn etmemiz gerekiyor. Dediğim gibi bu yaptığımız Türkiye Bilim raporunda aslında bu duruma detaylı sonuçlar bulduk. İsterseniz kalan 10 dakikalık süremde biraz size bu bulgularımızdan bahsetmek istiyorum. Şimdi bu göstermiş olduğum grafikte Türkiye'deki araştırmacı başına düşen yayın sayısını gösteriyorum. Ne oluyor burada? 1985'ten itibaren ciddi bir artış var. Hatta 2000'li yıllardan sonra ivmelenen bir artış var. 2000-2006 arasında çok ciddi bir ivmelenme var. Ama 2006'dan sonra kişi başına düşen yayın sayısında ne yazık ki bir durağanlık başlıyor. Dolayısıyla sorgulamamız gereken sorulardan bir tanesi bu 2006'dan sonraki durağanlık neden başlamış? Ve üniversiteleri aslında sormamız gereken sorulardan bir tanesi de bir üniversiteyi ne verimli hale getiriyor ya da bir üniversitedeki araştırmacıları ne verimli hale getiriyor? Bunu sorgulamamız gerekiyor. Şimdi bu konuda tabii ki detaylı ekonometrik araştırmalar yaptık. Onları ne yazık ki şu anda detaylı bir şekilde anlatamıyorum zaman darlığından ötürü, ama size sadece şöyle bir özet yapayım. Üniversitelerin yaşı ve büyüklüğü, üniversitelerin verimliliği için çok önemli bir etken. Yani üniversitelerin büyüklüğü aslında bizi çok şaşırtmaması lazım. Çünkü bu konferanstan da bildiğimiz üzere biz bulduğumuz şeyleri birbirimizle tartışmamız gerekiyor. Yani ben yeni bir projeye başladıysam ya da yeni bir şeyler bulduysam araştırmamda, bunu etrafımdaki insanlarla tartışıp onlardan feedback dediğimiz geri dönüşüm almam lazım ki acaba ben doğru yolda mı ilerliyorum, yoksa düzeltmem gereken başka şeyler mi var yaptığım araştırmada vesaire. Yani bana sürekli bir yorum gelmesi gerekiyor ki etrafımdaki bilen insanlardan, ben ona göre daha kaliteli, daha iyi işler çıkarayım. Gerekirse eleştirilmem de gerekiyor. Yapıcı bir şekilde eleştirilmem de gerekiyor ki ben doğru şeyi bulayım. Çünkü araştırma dediğimiz şey, zaten inovasyon dediğimiz şey deneme yanılmayla yapılan bir şeyler ve ne kadar yanıldığımızı, ne kadar yanlış yönde gittiğimizi bize söyleyebilecek, bize yön gösterebilecek insanlar varsa etrafımızda, o kadar verimli hale gelebiliyoruz. Yani üniversite ortamlarının, özellikle yeni fikirlerin, yeni inovasyonların, yeni yaratıcı düşüncelerin geliştirildiği yerlerin kalabalık olması ve fikir çarpışmalarına açık yerler olması gerekiyor. Dolayısıyla ekonometrik analizimiz de bizi bu konuda şaşırtmadı açıkçası. Büyük ve daha yaşlı olan, yani kültürünü oturtmuş üniversitelerin genel olarak daha verimli olduğunu görüyoruz. İkincisi, vakıf üniversitelerin ortalamada daha verimli olduklarını görüyoruz. Tabii ki bunlarda ben şu anda ortalamalardan bahsediyorum. Yani bunların her birine istisnai durumlar olacaktır. İşte bazı devlet üniversiteleri çok çok iyi olacaktır, bazı vakıf üniversiteleri çok çok kötü olacaktır vesaire. Yani burada tabii ki istisnalar olacaktır, ama ben size şu anda yaptığımız ekonometrik çalışmadaki ortalamalardan bahsediyorum ve ortalama olarak vakıf üniversitelerinin daha verimli olduğunu görüyoruz. Daha sonra şu çok enteresan bence. Araştırmacı başına düşen doktoralı öğrenci sayısı miktarı ne kadar yüksekse, yani benim etrafımda ne kadar fazla doktoralı öğrenci varsa, doktora öğrencim varsa, ben araştırmacı olarak o kadar daha verimli hale geliyorum. Yani bu aslında şaşırtıcı bir şey değil. Hepimizin 24 saati var. İşte 8 saati insanlar işte uyuyup kendilerine bakmakla geçireceklerse, işte kahvaltıdır, yemek yemektir vesaire. Geriye kalan maksimum 16 saat kalıyor. Şimdi 16 saatin ötesinde çalışamazsınız bir gün içerisinde. Ama zamanınıza ne zaman katacak? Yani sizin konuştuğunuz dilden anlayan, sizinle dirsek temasında olabilecek eğer öğrencileriniz varsa, bu tabii ki zamanınıza zaman katacaktır. Sizi daha verimli hale getirecektir. Ve yaptığımız araştırmada görüyoruz ki araştırmacı başına düşen doktoralı öğrenci sayısı ile araştırmacının verimliliği arasında çok ciddi bir pozitif ilişki var. Başka önemli bir bulgumuz da, üniversitelerin kuruldukları zamandaki çekirdek kadronun verimliliği üniversitenin uzun vadedeki verimliliğini belirliyor. Yani siz bugün bir üniversiteyi alırsanız, kurulduğu yıldaki çekirdek kadronun verimliliği üniversitenin bugünkü verimliliğini aslında çok açıklayıcı bir etkene sahip. Aslında bu da çok şaşırtıcı olmaması lazım. Eğer bir gömleği iliklerken yanlış bir ilikle başlarsanız gerisi de yanlış geliyor, ama doğru iliklerseniz gerisi de doğru geliyor. Yani aslında bu da çok şaşırtıcı olmaması lazım. Eğer iyi kadroyla başlarsanız, o iyi kadro da daha sonra iyi insanları işe alacaktır. Onlara doğru çalışma ortamını yaratacaktır, doğru örnek olacaktır ve oranın genel olarak verimliliği artacaktır. Bir tane negatif etken var. Bence bu çok önemli. Bu da araştırmacı başına, bir üniversitede araştırmacı başına düşen lisans öğrenci sayısı ne kadar yüksekse araştırmacıların verimliliği o kadar düşüyor. Yani bu da şaşırtmaması gerekiyor. Çünkü araştırmacıların ya da üniversitedeki akademisyenlerin iki görevi var. Yani iki temel görevi var. Başka görevlerimiz de var tabii ki, ama iki temel görevimiz var. Bir, araştırma yapmak, bir de ders vermek. Şimdi eğer çok fazla ders vermemiz gerekirse, benim ders vermem gereken öğrenci sayısı çok fazla olursa, çok fazla öğrenciyle ilgilenmem gerekirse araştırmalara daha az zamanım kalacaktır. Ben illaki şu ya da bu demiyorum, ama bu sadece ekonometrik olarak bir gözlem. Dolayısıyla biz insanların daha verimli hale gelmelerini istiyorsak, araştırmacıların daha verimli hale gelmelerini istiyorsak, onların araştırmaya ne kadar zaman ayırabildiklerini de göz önünde bulundurmamız gerekiyor. Belki de işte specialization dediğimiz, yani özelleşme, insanların daha iyi oldukları alanlara özelleşme. Yani ben iyi bir araştırmacıysam belki benim daha fazla araştırma yapmam, ya da ben iyi ders veriyorsam benim daha fazla ders vermem, eğer iki alanda da iyiysem göreceli üstünlüğüm neredeyse oraya göre davranmam vesaire düşünülmesi gereken önemli konular diye düşünüyorum. Onun haricinde araştırmacıların yaşam döngüsünü inceledik. Bu da çok bence çok çarpıcı bir grafik ve iyi anlaşılması gereken bir grafik bence. Sonuç olarak biz yani bir araştırmacı yetiştirmek gerçekten çok fazla kaynak ve zaman gerektiren bir şey. Yani devlet olarak ya da millet olarak kaynaklar belli bir yere konuluyor ve oradan o maliyetli şekilde araştırmacılar yaratıyoruz toplumda. Şimdi o araştırmacılar geriye ne veriyorlar onu anlamamız gerekiyor. Ya da nereye kadar geri dönüşüm yaratıyorlar onları anlamamız gerekiyor. Burada da araştırmacıların yaşam döngülerine baktık. Yatay eksende bir araştırmacının akademik yaşına bakıyoruz. Dikey eksende de ortalama yayın sayısı. Şimdi ilk 12 yılda genelde bu yardımcı doçentlik, eski adıyla yardımcı doçentlik, yeni adıyla doktor öğretim üyeliği dönemine denk geliyor. Orada araştırmacıların verimliliklerin zaman içerisinde arttığını görüyoruz. Ama 12. yıldan sonra genelde bu doçentlik dönemine denk geliyor. Doçentlik dönemine girdikten sonra bir yavaşlama gözlemliyoruz ve 17. yıldan sonra, çünkü 5 yıl sonra profesör olmaya hak kazanıyor doçentler. 5 yıl sonra, yani 17. yıldan sonra verimlilik aşağıya gelmeye başlıyor. Bence bu gerçekten üzerinde çok ciddi düşünmemiz ve çok derin tartışmamız gereken bir şey. Yani insanların en verimli, en tecrübelendiği zamanda niye verimlilikleri aşağı düşüyor? Bu sadece şöyle bir şey değil. Yani ben işte belli bir noktaya geldikten sonra ancak işte öğrenci yetiştiriyorum, o yüzden verimliliğim aşağı düşüyor değil. Tam tersine aslında ben daha fazla öğrenciyle konuşuyorsam bu genel olarak benim verimliliğime daha da katkı yapan bir şey ve ben öğrencilerimle daha da makaleler yazıyorum, işte onlarla fikir alışverişinde bulunuyorum vesaire. Etrafımda ne kadar öğrenci kalabalıklaşırsa çok daha verimli hale gelmeye başlıyorum. Ama dediğim gibi bu sıfatlar ya da işte bu terfiler son noktaya geldikten sonra ne yazık ki genel olarak verimlilik aşağı geliyor. Yine tekrarlıyorum. Yani burada tabii ki istisnalar var. Bu herkes için geçerli değil. Ama genel olarak motivasyonlar açısından bir sıkıntı olduğunu gösteriyor bu. Çünkü demek ki insanlar profesör olduktan sonra artık pek motivasyonları kalmıyor ve ondan sonra da verimlilikleri aşağı gelmeye başlıyor. Bu sorgulamamız gereken bir durum ve ona göre bir motivasyon mekanizmalarını tekrar gözden geçirmemiz gereken bir duruma işaret ediyor. Onun haricinde bu da bence çok enteresan bulgularımızdan, çok çarpıcı bulgularımızdan bir tanesi. İnsanların çalıştıkları kurumlar onların verimliliklerini çok ciddi şekilde belirliyor. Örneğin devlet üniversitesinde ya da vakıf üniversitesinde olması bir araştırmacının o kişinin verimliliğini çok derinden belirleyen bir şey. Burada şöyle bir olay vaka analizi yaptık. Sıfır sayısı, yatay eksendeki şu sıfır sayısı bir araştırmacının, bir akademisyenin devlet üniversitesinden vakıf üniversitesine geçtiği yılı gösteriyor. Eksi bir, transfer olduğu yıldan bir önceki yıl. Eksi iki, iki önceki yıl. Eksi üç, üç önceki yıl vesaire. Sağ tarafa doğru gittiğiniz zaman bir sayısı transfer olduktan bir yıl sonrası, transfer olduktan iki yıl sonrası, transfer olduktan üç yıl sonrası vesaire diye gidiyor. Şimdi şu sıfır noktası bir araştırmacının tekrar vakıf üniversitesinden, devlet üniversitesinden vakıf üniversitesine transfer olduğu dönem. Tekrar ediyorum. Devlet üniversitesinden vakıf üniversitesine transfer olduğu dönem. Şimdi öncesine bakarsanız verimliliği sabit. Ama ne zaman ki devlet üniversitesinden vakıf üniversitesine transfer oluyor bir araştırmacı, verimliliği artmaya başlıyor. Şimdi diyebilirsiniz ki belki bu sadece bir insanın kurum değiştirdiği için verimliliği artıyor. Yani siz bu insanı vakıf üniversitesinden devlet üniversitesine transfer etseniz yine verimliliği artacak. Çünkü yeni bir ortama geldiği için kendisini daha iyi hissediyor. Belki kendisini daha iyi organize ediyor diye düşünebilirsiniz. O yüzden bunun karşılığı olan vakıf üniversitesinden devlet üniversitesine transfer olan kişilere baktık. Ne yazık ki böyle bir artış gözlemleyemiyoruz. Tam tersi, hatta bir azalma gözlemliyoruz. Yani ne zaman ki bir insan vakıf üniversitesinden devlet üniversitesine geçiyor, verimliliğinde artış gözlemlemiyoruz. Hatta eğer bir değişiklik varsa daha çok aşağı giden bir değişiklik. Dolayısıyla burada çıkan başka bir sonuç da dediğim gibi vakıf üniversitelerinde insanlar daha motiveler, daha fazla çalışıyorlar ve bu da sorgulanılması gereken bir şey. Yani ne insanları orada daha verimli hale getiriyor? Ellerindeki kaynaklar olabilir, maaş durumları olabilir ya da oradaki review prosesi, yani insanların yıl sonunda nasıl gözden geçirildikleri olabilir. Yani bunları tartışmamız ve ona göre motivasyonları tekrar oluşturmamız gerekiyor devlet üniversitelerinde de. Tabii motivasyondan bahsetmişken bazen devletin ya da işte YÖK'ün koyduğu bazı kurallar insanların motivasyonunu arttırmak için yapılması gereken şeylerden bir tanesi de bu konulan teşvik programlarının ya da teşvik desteklerinin ne kadar çalıştıklarını bir anlamamız gerekiyor. Bu konuda da size enteresan bir şey göstermek istiyorum. Örneğin YÖK 2000 yılında SSCI yayın gerekliliği getirdi ve dedi ki işte alana göre en az 2 tane ya da en az 3 tane araştırması SCI ya da SSCI araştırması olan insanların doçentliğe terfi edebileceğini söyledi 2000 senesinde. Ve biz burada kontrol grubu ve deney grubu ve kontrol grubu, müdahale grubu ve kontrol grubu oluşturduk. Aslında çok güzel bir analiz oldu bu. Çünkü aynı yaştaki iki insan alıyorsunuz. Bir tanesinin 3'ten fazla yayını var. Eğer bir tanesinin 3'ten fazla yayını varsa bu yeni gelen regülasyon 2000 senesi itibariyle 3'ten fazla yayını varsa bu yeni gelen regülasyon o kişiyi etkilemiyor. Çünkü o zaten çoktan çıtayı geçmiş durumda 3'ten fazla yayını varsa. Ama benim 3'ten az ise yayınım, o zaman bu regülasyon beni etkilemeye başlıyor. Çünkü 3'ten az yayınım regülasyon diyor ki işte Ufuk Akçiğit eğer 3'ten fazla yayın yapmazsa doçent olamaz diyor. Dolayısıyla ben aslında müdahale grubu oluyorum 3'ten az olan birisi olarak ama benim yaşımda ve benim akademik yaşımda 3'ten fazla yayını olan birisi etkilenmediği için kontrol grubu oluyor. İşte gri çizgi müdahale grubu, kırmızı çizgi de kontrol grubu. Ne görüyoruz? Müdahale grubunun yayınlarında ciddi bir artış görüyoruz 2000 senesinden itibaren. Şaşırtıcı olmaması lazım. Neden? Çünkü regülasyon size diyor ki 3'ten fazla yayın yapacaksın terfi olmak için. İnsanlar tabii ki motivasyona, güdülere cevap veriyorlar ve yayınlarını arttırmaya başlıyorlar. Ama insanlar bu motivasyonlarını arttırırken tabii ki de stratejik davranıyorlar. Neden? Çünkü siz işte SSCI yayın yapacaksınız derseniz SSCI dergi var, SSCI dergi var. Yani yayın yapması çok zor olan, çok yüksek kaliteli SSCI dergiler de var. Kalitesi çok düşük, impact factor'ı, etki değeri çok düşük dergiler, SSCI dergileri de var. Dolayısıyla bana eğer rakam olarak bir çıta koyarsanız ben bu sefer kaliteden ödün vereceğim büyük ihtimalle. Çünkü bana diyorsunuz ki işte 3 tane yayın yapacaksın. O zaman ben 3 yayını en kolay nasıl yaparım? İşte basması daha kolay olan, kaliteleri daha düşük dergilerde 3 tane bir an önce yayın yapmaya çalışacağım. Bunu görebiliyor muyuz? Bunu görebiliyoruz, evet. Şimdi bakarsanız burada insanların yayın yaptığı dergilerin kalite dağılımını gösteriyoruz farklı farklı yıllarda. 96 ile 2000 yılları arasındaki yapılan yayınlar şu gri çizgi, 2001 ile 2005 arası olan kırmızı çizgi, 2006'dan sonra olanlar mavi çizgi. Ne görüyorsunuz? Zaman içerisinde genelde sayı bazlı regülasyonlar geliyor. Sayı bazlı regülasyonlar gelince daha sonra hatta TÜBİTAK'ın verdiği desteklerde de yayın sayısı miktarları gelmeye başlıyor 2006 senesinden sonra. Kalite dağılımında ne görüyorsunuz? Sola doğru kayma görüyorsunuz Türkiye'de. Yani insanlar sayıyı tutturabilmek için kaliteden ödün vermeye başlıyorlar ve kalite dağılımı gitgide sola kaymaya başlıyor. Yaptığımız işte regülasyonları bu açıdan da sorgulamamız gerekiyor. Yani olay sadece sayı, miktar değil, aynı zamanda yapılan yayınların kalitesi de. Çünkü biz biliyoruz ki aslında sadece bir eli doldurabilecek kadar fikirler bizim gerçekten dünyamızı değiştiriyor, değil mi? Yani yani bugüne kadar kullandığımız teknolojileri düşünün. İşte mikrodalgadır, işte buzdolabıdır vesaire. Yani bazı teknolojiler var ki gerçekten bizim hayatımızı çok derinden etkiliyor. Ama onun haricinde bir dolu hiçbir işe yaramamış, patentlenmiş fikirler de var. Dolayısıyla bizim aslında işte bu kalite, sayı ve miktar ve kalite arasındaki trade-off'u da ödünleşmeyi de orada hesaba katmamız gerekiyor. Yani kriterleri oluştururken sadece sayı bazlı değil, kalite bazlı da göz önünde bulundurmamız gerekiyor. Son olarak söylemek istediğim şey de disiplinler arası çalışma, tekrar Rektör Bey'in konuşmasından yola çıkarsak bahsetti kolaborasyonun ya da işte işbirliklerinin ne kadar önemli olduğu konusunda. Hatta OSTİM'in bir sanayi üniversitesi olduğu ve sanayiyle ne kadar dirsek temasında olmasının büyük bir artı olduğu konusunda. Türkiye'nin genelinde böyle bir işbirliği konusunda ne durumdayız ona bakmaya çalıştık. Öncü ülkelerde disiplinler arası çalışmaların payına baktık. Öncü ülkelerdeki disiplinler arası çalışmaların payı bu gri çizgi, gördüğünüz gri çizgi. İşte yapılan yayınların %10'uyla başlamış, şimdi %15'lere kadar çıkmış. %15'i disiplinler arası yapılan çalışmalar. Türkiye'de ise ne yazık ki %8'de kalmış durumdayız. Yani yarı yarıya neredeyse. Ve dünyada bir ivme var disiplinler arası çalışma konusunda ve bu gitgide teşvik edilmeye çalışılan bir şey. Türkiye'de ne yazık ki bir miktar artış gözlemliyoruz ama yeterli değil. Bunu da daha fazla teşvik etmemiz gerekiyor. Daha fazla disiplinler arası çalışmayı önceliklendirmemiz gerekiyor. Çünkü biz biliyoruz ki fikirler gitgide daha zorlaşıyor. Teknolojiler gitgide daha zorlaşıyor. Dolayısıyla farklı alanlardan farklı bakış açıları gerekiyor ki bu önümüzdeki daha zor problemleri çözebilelim. Bu yüzden de disiplinler arası çalışmaların önceliklendirilmesi ve teşvik edilmesi çok faydalı olacaktır diye düşünüyorum. Zamanım doldu. Beni dinlediğiniz için çok çok teşekkür ederim. Sağ olun.
Üniversitesi'nden Profesör Doktor Ufuk Akçiğit'e katılımlarına dolayı teşekkür ediyorum. Salonda soru var mı kendilerine? Soru sormak isteyen var mı? Rektör hocamız burada. Evet. Mikrofon. Ufuk hocam sesiniz geliyor mu?
Evet, geliyor.
Rektör hocam size bir soru var. Bu arada Merkez Bankamızdan kıymetli misafirlerimiz de var. Sizi dinlediler.
Harika, harika. Herkese çok çok selamlar buradan.
Ufuk Hocam merhaba.
Merhabalar hocam.
Merhaba, selam. Şöyle bir şey söyleyebilir miyiz? Yani genelde vakıf üniversitelerinin performansı devlet üniversitelerine göre daha yüksek olması yayın açısından beklenir diyebilir miyiz sizin sonuçlarını? Bu, hani bahsettiniz ya bir hoca devlet üniversitesindeki insentiflerle vakıf üniversitesindeki baskılar ve insentifler karşılaştırıldığında çok ilginç bir şeydi o grafikti. Ben televizyonda da seyretmiştim zaten. Birdenbire Türkiye'de yayınları artmaya başladı. Genel olarak hani bu performans teşvikleri, sistemleri vesaire vakıf üniversitelerinde, devlet üniversitelerinde daha iyi demek midir bu?
Sorunuzun son kısmı tam anlayamadım ama ben anladığım şekilde cevaplayayım. Eğer cevap olmazsa lütfen tekrar sorun hocam. Şimdi baktığımız zaman kesinlikle vakıf, yani aynı kişi vakıf üniversitesine geçtiğinde daha verimli hale geliyor. Dolayısıyla bu artık çevre koşullarından bağımsız, yani kişinin kendisine ait koşullardan bağımsız bir şekilde bulunduğu kurumdan etkilendiğini gösteriyor. Şimdi araştırmamız şunun net cevabını henüz vermiyor. Yani vakıf üniversitelerindeki ne bu insanları daha verimli hale getiriyor, onu cevaplayamıyoruz çünkü elimizdeki veriler kısıtlı. Ama elimizdeki verilerle yaptığımız diğer bir bulgu, ortaya çıkardığımız diğer bulgu, hatırlıyorsanız kişi başına düşen doktoralı öğrenci sayısının bir insanı daha verimli hale getirmesi, lisans öğrenci sayısının araştırmacının verimliliği açısından daha verimsiz hale getirmesi aslında bu işe biraz cevap sağlıyor. Çünkü biliyoruz ki biz devlet üniversitelerinde genel olarak ders sayısı çok yüksek. Yani bu yaptığımız en azından şifayen yaptığımız konuşmalarda insanlarla devlet üniversitelerine çok daha fazla ders vermeleri gerekiyor. Bu tabii ki araştırma için kalan zamanı azaltıyor. Onun haricinde vakıf üniversitelerinde genelde biliyorsunuz daha sözleşme bazlı olduğu için insanlar bir şekilde kendilerini daha sıcak tutuyorlar gibi geliyor bana. Çünkü Türkiye'de bunun örnekleri oldu. Yani yeterince verimli olmayan bazı akademisyenlerle yollar ayrıldı bazı üniversiteler, vakıf üniversitelerinde. Ve bu da insanlara aslında örnek oldu. Dolayısıyla bu review proses gerçekten farklı çalışıyor gibi geliyor bana. Bu da bence sorgulanması gereken sorulardan bir tanesi. Ayrıca devlet üniversitelerindeki maaş skalaları biliyorsunuz daha sabit bir şekilde ilerliyor. Vakıf üniversitelerinde biraz daha Buna araştırma bütçesi de dahil. Araştırma bütçesi ve maaş profilleri daha farklı çalışıyor. Ve biz ekonomiden de çok iyi bir şekilde biliyoruz ki zaten Nobel ödülü de benzer bir sebepten verildi dün. Yani insanlara oluşturduğunuz insentif mekanizmaları nasıl oturttunuz? Yani baştan mı veriyorsunuz ödülü, sondan mı veriyorsunuz, sonuç bazlı mı veriyorsunuz? Bunların hepsi etken. Dolayısıyla bunları tek tek bence bir şekilde oturup tartışmamız gerekiyor. Veriler bize açılsa biz çok daha net bunun cevaplarını verebiliriz. Yani bize mikro veriler, üniversitelerin bütçeleri, yaptıkları harcamalar, bunların bütün hepsinin verileri var aslında. Bize açılsa bunlar, biz bunların cevaplarını tek tek verebiliriz. Vakıf Üniversitesi'nde insanları ne verimli hale getiriyor diye. Ama elimizde mikro veriler olmadığı için bu detayda biz elimizdeki daha dolaylı verileri kullanarak biz bu araştırmamızı kendi kaynaklarımızla yaptık. Umarım daha detaylı cevaplar verebiliriz ileride.
Çok teşekkür. Sizin televizyondaki Fatih Altaylı'yla olan programınızda Üniversitesi'de neredeyse bütün hocalar. Oradan kalan bir soru vardı. Şimdi siz de Chicago Üniversitesi'ndesiniz. O gazeteci arkadaşım size bir soru sordu. Sizin üniversitenizde, Vakıf Üniversitesi, bir yardımcı doçent, bir profesörden daha yüksek maaş alabilir. Siz de dediniz ki tamamıyla bir hocanın ücreti bizim üniversitemizde buraya getirdiği araştırma fonları artı yayınıyla belli oluyor. Bir nevi ekonomik katkısı, yani marginal product'ıyla belli oluyor gibi bir şey dediniz. Biz de üniversitede açıkçası bir format oluşturmaya çalıştık. Bunları düşünüyoruz. Nasıl incentivize edebiliriz ki hocalarımıza, akademisyenlerimize daha fazla verimli olsunlar. Ve orada da bize gelecek her türlü öneriye açığız.
Evet.
Son bir şey sormak istiyorum. Amerika'da belki bilmiyor olabilirsiniz, ben bilmediğim için. İlk 50 üniversitenin içinde şöyle sorayım. Devlet üniversitesi var mı aklınızda? Mesela Berkeley falan olabilir belki.
Evet.
Üniversitesi olabilir Amerika'da. X sıralamasına göre herhalde büyük kısmı vakıf değil mi?
Çok büyük bir oranı vakıf üniversitesi ama ilk 50'den zaten ilk 20'de hatta birkaç tane devlet üniversitesi var. Berkeley kesinlikle söylediğiniz gibi, UCLA ayrıca çok başarılı. Minnesota yine aynı şekilde başarılı. Wisconsin ve Michigan'da yani başarılı üniversiteler. Şimdi aslında şöyle bir durum var hocam. Yani bunu biraz daha detaylandırmak gerekirse, genelde Amerika'daki araştırmacıların piyasası aynı sporcular gibi çalışıyor. Yani dışarıdan birisi teklif getirmediği sürece genelde bütçelerinde ya da maaşlarında ya da araştırma fonlarında çok bir değişiklik olmuyor. Ancak işte enflasyona belki adapte olursa, ama bu kadarla kalıyor. Yani bir insanın gerçekten bir upgrade alabilmesi için, bir iyileştirme alabilmesi için dışarıdan transfer teklifi alması gerekiyor. Ve dışarıdan transfer teklifi aldıktan sonra kendi kuruluşu ona göre cevap veriyor. Yani biz bu kişiyi gerçekten tutmak için müdahale edelim mi? Yoksa biz gitmesine izin mi verelim? Yani bu aynen dediğim gibi, yani nasıl bir futbolcu transferi yapılıyor? Araştırmacı transferleri de, akademisyen transferleri de bu şekilde gelişiyor. Şimdi böyle bir kültür oluşturduktan sonra insanlar zaten kendilerini ispatlıyorlar. İspatlarlarsa ona göre kazançları yukarı gidiyor. Eğer ispatlamazlarsa maaşları gerçekten çok geride kalıyor. İnsan kariyerinde farklı bir yön de çizebilir kendisine bir noktadan itibaren. Der ki ben çok fazla araştırmaya ağırlık vermeyeceğim. Ama o zaman bu kişilerin üniversiteye olan yükleri de azalmaya başlıyor. Yani özellikle maaş açısından çok geride kalıyorlar. Onlar da zaten sırf üniversitenin sıfatıyla bir şekilde CV'lerinde devam ediyorlar. Ama genellikle bu böyle olmuyor. Genellikle dediğim gibi çok daha fazla insanlar kendilerini ispatlamaya çalıştıkları için, yaşları ne olursa olsun, bir şekilde bu araştırmalar ve insanların işte güdüleri ayakta kalabiliyor. Buna devlet üniversiteleri de katılıyorlar bu arada. Devlet üniversiteleri de bu şekilde çalışıyor. Sadece onlarda genelde bir tavan olabiliyor. Bazen tavan olabiliyor ama bunları aslında devlet üniversitesindeki maaşlar yayınlanıyor. Yani siz ya da ben konferanstan sonra bir devlet üniversitesi çalışan birisinin maaşını görebiliyorum. Dolayısıyla oraya da bakıp aslında görebilirsiniz ne kadar insanlar arasında farklar olduğunu ve yeni başlayan birisinin doçentten ya da bir profesörden daha fazla maaş alabildiği durumlar da söz konusu olabiliyor. Hatta olay sadece maaş değil, bazen hiç ders verme diyorsunuz. Yani yeni gelen birisine bana gelirsen hiç ders vermeyeceksin, sadece araştırmalarına odaklanacaksın ilk 3 sene ya da ilk 5 sene, hatta bazen ilk 5 sene doğru dürüst ders vermeyeceksin. Maaşını sana tam olarak vereceğiz. Sen sadece araştırmalarına bakıyorsun. Bu da insanların önceliklendirmesi konusunda da farklılıklar yaratıyor kurumlar arasında.
Hocam, bir de rektör yardımcımız Profesör Doktor Ünsal Sığır Hocamızın bir sorusu olacak size.
Buyursunlar.
Ufuk Hocam merhabalar.
Merhabalar.
Ufuk Hocam merhabalar. Programlarınız, blogda analizlerinizi parça parça yayınladığınızı hep takip ettik. Orada akademik üretimin temel lokomotifi olarak etkileşime vurgu yapıyor idiniz. Bir araya gelme, konuşma, tartışma, geri bildirim. Bu son dönemde bu akademik etkileşim, bu online platforma şu anda da bulunduğumuz yere taşındı. Sizce bu akademik üretimin nasıl etkileneceğini önümüzdeki birkaç yılda düşünüyorsunuz? Bu online platformlar yerini tuttu mu? Nasıl olacak? Avantajı ve dezavantajı ne oldu bunun?
Hocam çok güzel bir soru soruyorsunuz. Gerçekten bu benim kafamı da kendi hayatımdan yola çıkarak kafamı da çok karıştıran bir şey. Çünkü ben şöyle söyleyeyim size, normal zamanda pandemi öncesinde 2 hafta üst üste kendi evimde yatmamışımdır. Yani sürekli havaalanlarındaydım, sürekli seyahat halindeydim ve ülkeler arası sürekli seyahat ediyordum. Ve yani bugüne kadar yaptığım araştırmalardan çoğu fikri böyle hiç aklınıza gelmeyecek, olmadık bir akşam yemeği yerken bazı araştırmacılarla, mesela örneğin şu anda bu iletişim konusunda bir makale yazdık. Onu Ekonometrika, bizim en önemli dergilerden bir tanesi için şu anda revize ediyoruz. Çok güzel bir makale oldu. Onu mesela Fransa'nın Bordeaux şehrinde seminer veriyordum. Beni böyle çok da acelem vardı. İşte seminer bitti, apar topar tren istasyonuna gittik. Tam hadi aç binme dediler. Orada böyle bir restoranda hızlıca bir yemek yerken, konuşurken o anda bir anda fikir geldi. Yani böyle bir araştırma yapma fikri. Sonra Bordeaux'dan araştırmacılarla oturduk. Bunun sözünü aldık. Birlikte çalışalım diye ve ondan sonra trene bindim ve gittim. Şimdi bu araştırma, bu iletişim olmasaydı orada, tamamen bazen rastlantısal oluyor bazı şeyler. O iletişim olmasa ya da çok benzer bir şekilde Cevriye Hanım'ın orada olduğunu biliyorum, salonda sanırım şu anda. Örneğin Cevriye Hanım'la Paris'te bir konferansta karşılaştık. Yani tamamen rastlantısal bir şekilde ben OECD, Dünya Bankası ve IMF'nin ortak düzenlediği bir konferansta baş konuşmacı olarak konuşma yapmıştım. Cevriye Hanım da oraya katılmış ve orada tamamen ilk defa rastlantımız o şekilde oldu ve o şekilde ortak bir şekilde çalışmaya başladık. Yani oradaki karşılaşma olmasa belki de birlikte çalışma fırsatımız ya olmayacaktı ya da gecikecekti. Yani bunları hiçbir zaman replike edemeyeceğiz. Yani online iletişimler şu açıdan çok iyi. Havaalanlarına giderkenki zaman kaybını yaşamıyoruz kesinlikle. Ya da işte otel odalarında işte insan kendi evi gibi olmuyor tabii ki. Ama o iletişimleri bir şekilde sağlamamız gerekiyor. O yüzden de bence yapılması gereken şey, insanların kendilerini zorlayarak dahi olsa araştırma grupları halinde bir araya gelmesi gerekiyor ve tartışmaların devam etmesi gerekiyor. Yani ben örneğin şu anda Chicago'daki araştırma grubumla haftada bir sürekli en azından görüşmem gerekiyor. Ya da Almanya'da bir araştırma takım var. Onlarla haftada bir görüşmem gerekiyor. Türkiye'deki birlikte çalıştığım insanlarla. Bunu sıcak tutmamız gerekiyor ve buna da özellikle liderlik edecek insanların kendilerini zorlayıp buna aracı olmaları gerekiyor. Yani ben açıkçası bu dönemin bir avantaj dönemi olduğunu düşünüyorum. Çünkü bize daha fazla zaman yarattı. Ama bu avantaj dönemleri insanların işte liderlik ya da bu inisiyatif alabilme yetilerini de ortaya çıkarıyor bir taraftan da. Daha girişimci insanlar için çok iyi fırsatlar oluşuyor gibi geliyor bana. Ama girişimci olmayan insanlar bence elimine olacaklar. Çünkü ister istemez daha sosyal özellikleri iyi olmayan insanlar bu online ortamlarda daha geriye kalacaklar gibi geliyor bana. benim düşüncem, ama yani bunun uzun vadede analizlerini artık göreceğiz. Bakalım bu pandemi ne sonuçlar doğuracak. Ben de çok merak ediyorum.
Türkiye'de Üniversiteler ve İnovasyon Kurulu konuşmamızdan dolayı size çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Katma değerli bir konuşma oldu. Salon olarak herkes size saygılarını sunuyor. Teşekkür ediyoruz tekrar.
Ben teşekkür ederim. Çok teşekkürler.
Evet. Bunu başlatmak üzere Profesör Doktor Johannes Wissema, Hollanda Delft Teknoloji Üniversitesi'nden şu anda aramızda. You are welcome.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? Hello.
If you are ready, we can start.
Yes, it's all on.
Okay.
Am I coming through?
Yes,
Yes, yes.
All right,
All right.
let's get cracking.
Okay.
Thank you. Now, you have to allow me to get my slides. Oh dear. No. How do I get my slides on the screen? Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to participate in the SEPIP seminar, which is every year a great success, thanks to the efforts of my good friend, your rector, Murat Yulek, and his staff. I'd like to take you to some points about the consequences of the no. How do I, can someone help me to?
Professor, you can use
I would have share screen.
screen, the green one.
But
You see different screens, and you choose your own screen that you want to project.
yes, but the last time we could just squeeze it in. No, this is not going.
Click on share screen, right? You have opened your presentation before, right? It is already open on your computer, right?
No, I'm sorry, I can't get the presentation in, so let me do it without without my sheets. Well, the title is Industrial Policy After COVID-19. And I think the first question is there going to be such a thing like a period after COVID-19? There's a lot of people who say, experts who say that it won't go away, not in a few years, but also not in a longer period of time. So this might be something we have to live with for quite a while. And it will be too optimistic to say that, let's say next year, summer, everything is back to normal. That's not going to happen. So the question then is, what will change because of COVID? And the answer as such is not much, but COVID will accelerate a number of trends that are already going on. And let me give you 4 of these trends. The first one is that companies start sourcing closer to home. And they want to reduce the length and complexity of supply lines in order to be more secure about their supplies. According to McKinsey, 93% of the American firms are studying this, studying to see how they can make their supply lines more resilient. So there we will see some changes, most notably manufacturing that's now carried out in Asia being closer to Europe and to the United States. I think in terms of industrial policy, there are opportunities for Turkey here. Second trend, because of COVID, is that we're protecting national industries. This is what countries like France and Germany call the national champions. Even the Germans, who are very free market, have installed impediments for selling important German companies, or at least companies they consider of strategic importance to the country. And so this is a trend that is going on already for a while, at least a number of years after the enormous globalization. You can say it's a backlash, but it will certainly be accelerated because of the COVID experience. Now you can think of pharmaceutical industries. In my country, in the Netherlands, there was an uproar when it turned out that Philips Electronics, which is, as you may know, based in the Netherlands, is a Dutch company basically, but a global company, that they had sold a large number of ventilators to the United States and couldn't supply Holland. So I said, what the hell is this? We're producing this stuff and we're exporting it. Yeah, that's international trade. I think it was fixed in the end, but it is an example of keeping national industry for ourselves. And then another trend is what we have seen for a long time already, maybe already for 30 years, is digitization of just about everything. And there's amazing how much new technology comes up all the time. For instance, this video conferencing would not have been possible without the Zoom program and the other programs you use. So it is expanding all the time. And home working, as we shall see later, is of course also a boost to digitization. And then finally, as a fourth trend, I would say limiting travel, international travel especially, because of home working, also travel in cities. It's not so long, well, it's not long, well, it depends on what you call long, but about 30 years ago, a friend of mine who was a bank director had to fly from Amsterdam to New York with the Concorde from Heathrow, flying back the next flight just to put a signature under an important document. Now, this is nowadays is impossible to imagine such an action, and then it was quite normal. So I think the decline in airline travel will continue. Companies are increasingly video conferencing, and instead of having physical meetings with people traveling, I see it all around me. So there are another number of things. Home working will stay. About 70% of the American home workers, they say in interviews, it's better or much better than what they expected. So it's a very positive experience, and that's what you hear everywhere and see everywhere. And therefore, there's an American figure, the number of days worked at home may jump from 5% to 20%, which is a very big increase. Then we will have sectors like restaurants, cinemas, etc., where people are sitting close together. They will have to introduce space with the logical consequences that will become more expensive. If you can have 100 people in a restaurant and them sharing, let's say, the cost of the facilities, if you have only 50%, the prices will go up, of course. Now, then, of course, like every evil thing, there are also positive sides. The pandemic creates opportunities for innovation and automation. There's large-scale automation going on. The negative side of that, it is that it will create problems for unskilled workers and rising inequalities. And this is particularly severe as the inequalities are so very high already. People having hundreds of millions of income and the common man just enough to live on, or not even that. So this is going to create a large social tension, and actually there is a lot of social tension already. If you look at populist parties, of course they don't arise only because of this, but it's certainly a factor. And now you see that some of these factors are mutually reinforcing. The further increase of IT will stimulate home working, and so on. So that it is a set of variables that's going to have important consequences. The Economist says the pandemic will reshape globalization. It will not end it. The idea is that we would all get countries that are more or less self-sufficient is nonsense. Globalization will continue because it has such enormous advantages if you can produce services or goods at the point on earth where it is cheapest. That's to the benefit of everybody. Now you see that this globalization is still going on. The World Trade Organization, WTO, they forecast that for this year, international transport would shrink by 30%. Well, actually, it seems now it will only be 8%. Now you can say 8% is still a big decline, but then remember that in the past 10 years, international transport grew 10% per year. So it merely sets us back less than 1 year. And well, I wouldn't say it's insignificant, but it is not a complete redesign of international trade. I think they are so obvious, the benefits of international trade, that there will be a rebound of this internationalization. And in addition, a far bigger threat to the international supply lines than COVID are the trade wars that are going on, mainly for political reasons, power games. And in the end, I think these will also be resolved. I'm optimistic about it simply because the United States and China, they have to come to some understanding because there's too much to risk. Huawei can't do without American or European chips, and Apple cannot build computers when they're not having facilities in China and so on. So it is almost certain that this will bounce back. Now, this leads me to the question, what did we learn? What did the world learn from this COVID? And let's face it, it's the first time in history that we have to deal with a truly global disaster. This COVID affects every country, every company, and every citizen. And we have never had that before. So it requires a strong worldwide response. And unfortunately, this has not happened. Governments are very reluctant to take the right measures. Of course, there are good examples that show that it's possible to do it anyway. But many autocrats are in denial. I'm not only thinking of President Trump, also Mr. Bolsonaro, Modi. In the Philippines, you have dictators who say, oh, this is all nonsense. It will blow over. And of course, in those countries, you see an enormous surge in the disease. Even worse, maybe, is that large parts of the population are not willing to discipline themselves to the measures required by the, let's say, the medical imperatives. The medical imperatives, for instance, say that we have to keep social distancing, washing our hands, and wearing a mask. Well, I don't know what the situation is like in Turkey, but I was in a supermarket the other day to do my shopping, and I was the only one to wear a mask. and nobody was wearing gloves. And actually, I was not either, but I have to pick up this habit again. So we don't have the difference and the discipline. And a lot of people say, yeah, I'm fed up with this COVID, so I'm going to go with my friends to a bar, sitting on top of each other, speaking loud and speaking wet, if I may use that expression, which is the perfect way to spread the disease. And then internationally speaking, the WHO does not have any authority. And this is what is worrying me, that we are not able to come to a united response to this COVID, because it abodes bad for the real threat. I don't think the pandemic is a real threat to life on Earth. It may cost many millions of lives, but that's not the end of it. What could end it is climatic change, and this is really very, very dangerous. If you see the enormous loss of species, now birds dying by the millions, ice melting. There was a report the other day that I think in 2 decades, the whole Arctic, that is the area around the North Pole, will be water. There won't be any ice anymore. And this expedition, German exhibition, has visited places where they say not long ago there was an ice layer of more than 1 meter. Now it's just open sea, wildfires. It'll mean relocation of people. And this is the real threat, and you can only fight it with a global approach. If some countries try to reduce carbon dioxide and other gases, and other countries don't, the effect is, of course, very minimal. And again, many people are in denial of this. Now, the energy transition, which is the heart of fighting climate change, will have very important consequences for industrial policy, because many branches of industry will become obsolete and will be replaced by new branches. Traditional car industry versus electrical cars, and eventually, I think the solution will be hydrogen-driven cars, because as I see it, the batteries that we use now in an electrical car are only a transitionary technology, and it will soon be replaced. So we have a couple of breakthroughs in hydrogen, because hydrogen has enormous content, and it's very clean, energy content, sorry. It's very clean, and once we can manage to produce it cheap and safely on a large scale, that will be the winner. And then, well, we have we have done a main step in combating this climate change. Another part of the climate change is food transition. In the not so near future, only the happy few will be able to eat animals, as we do now all today. But eating animals is a very environmentally costly way of getting proteins, and there are much better ways that we simply have to get used to. Now, of course, eating habits are very difficult to change. They're part of our culture. But there are steps. You see that it's growing like crazy. And it also means that certain industries will die out and entirely new ones will come up. And industrial policy of any country will be aimed at getting the new food companies, getting the new energy companies. I'm sure of that. So to sum it up, this is my last sheet that you can't see, unfortunately, is that the new industrial policy will consist of stimulating elements of the hydrogen economy and also of the food transition. There will be major elements of it. And then I think that a new industry will be capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, also nitrogen oxides. This is almost impossible at the moment. There are some experiments that look promising, but it's far from something on a large scale. And of course, we have to make an economic model to make it profitable for companies to capture carbon. Once that has been found, that could be also an important industry and part of industrial policy of many countries. Then I would say you can, yeah, I'm almost there. You can doubt whether this is really part of industrial policy, but it's all a matter of name. But we will need massive reforestation. There have been planting trees in parts of the Southern Sahara, which has become quite successful after a number of years. These trees are self-supporting, they don't need to be watered. A country like Turkey could plant millions of trees, maybe 10 millions of trees. It would make the country, give it a better climate, and it would also combat the climate change. Well, and then finally, this enormous increase in the importance of information technology means that we need to break up monopolies. There's too much monopoly in this area. And I think that will also become an important element of the industrial policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation.
Professor, thanks so much for your presentation. You hear us, right?
Yes, I do hear you.
Okay, so you, let me say you that we are very happy and honored to have you as a faculty in our academic staff.
I can hear you, but I find you difficult to understand.
We are very happy and honored to have you as a faculty at our university. You don't hear, right?
No, I don't get the question right.
It was not a question at the first time.
I see.
We're very happy to have you as an academic staff at our university.
Well, of course, for technical universities, there's an enormous challenge in all these areas I have mentioned, the food transition, energy transition, hydrogen economy, and a lot still to be done in artificial intelligence and IT. So I would say universities are more important maybe than ever. But yeah, people have said that in other periods, but it's certainly true today. They're very important. They have to provide the inventors and scientists that will make the changes possible.
And the second one, you have concluded that the international arena and the institutions have failed to properly react to COVID-19 crisis. And how did you see the reaction of academy, universities during this period of time?
I would say universities do not have the upper hand in technological change. If you see how much IT companies, for instance, spend on research, IBM makes about a quarter of its profits from selling know-how, and they sell much more than well, all universities, I guess, because they don't have the figures. Maybe there are exceptions to the rule, but the real work is done in private laboratories of companies. But still, if you look at the Nobel Prizes, for instance, most Nobel Prizes go to academics. They still do.
Thanks so much. Any other questions? Yes, you have one more question.
Thank you, Professor, for the very rich and insightful presentation. It was very comprehensive.
Can you speak slowly into the microphone, please?
Okay, this is Kenan Bağcı. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. So my question is about, so as you mentioned, the pandemic will be affecting world economy from different dimensions. One aspect is the disruption of global value chains. And there is also ongoing trade wars. So, in fact, developing countries have been benefiting from this distribution of tasks across the region. But after the pandemic, so firms are seeking more resilient supply chains. So this rising nationalism and growing protectionism have implications on developing countries. So what would be the potential policy implications for developing countries if developed countries continue to, let's say, self-sufficient in terms of supply chains? So what kind of economic consequences would be on developing countries?
Well, developing countries have, of course, the advantage of cheap labor, and in industries where that matters, they can use it. But the demand is more for not so much for cheap labor, because if you make cars, for instance, with robots and everything, the cost of labor is well, it's very small, relatively speaking. And that's why I think we produce now more cars in Europe as a percentage of the world total than we did before. So yeah, for developing countries, there are certainly opportunities, but maybe not as much as there used to be. You see that in certain countries, they produce so-called bio-food. I don't know the details of it, but it seems to be healthier. And at least in Europe, in the United States, and probably in Turkey as well, there are lots of people who want to have bio bananas and apples and what have you. And these are no doubt easier to produce in developing countries, which have a better climate, have more space, etc., than in Europe. So there are opportunities. And of course, when the hydrogen economy starts, then yeah, where we produce hydro energy from hydrogen from sun, of course, in the solar belt around the world, and that is mainly developing countries. So I do think there are opportunities.
Okay. We complete the sixth session with Professor Friedman. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yedinci panel oturumunu başlatmak üzere Asya ve Afrika'da sanayi kalkınma ve endüstriyel politikalar sunumunu yapmak üzere moderatörlüğünde Profesör Doktor Ali Akkemik, Yamaguchi Üniversitesi Japonya'dan. Burada mı kendileri? Ali Hocam.
Duyabiliyor musunuz beni?
Evet. Sesim geliyor mu?
Geliyor, evet.
Diğer katılımcılarımızı kısaca isimlerini okuyun isterseniz.
Tabii, buyurun.
Yamaguchi Üniversitesi Doktor Kuniaki Amatsu, Tao Kui Dang, Doktor Christian Samen Ochia, yanlış söylediysem kusura bakmasınlar. Angola Katolik Üniversitesi Profesör Doktor Salim Vali Mamade ve Malezya Putra Üniversitesi'nden Doktor Mahmut Yusuf Tari. Kendileri buralarda mı?
Evet, burada.
Evet.
Sadece Cristiano Oche yok, onu bekleyeceğiz galiba. Thank you very much. We now start session 7. I'm so sorry, terribly sorry for the long delay. We have a 1 hour delay. I'm really thankful for your patience. Well, this kind of things happen. So I don't want to take any more time by introducing anyone here. Please, at the beginning of your presentation, briefly introduce yourself. Each participant has 15 minutes. Please keep time. We're running already with a delay, so I think we should do our best to at least keep it running. So I would like to invite each of these panelists in the same order. In the same order, is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So I would like to start with Professor Salim Wali Mamadi, I guess. Professor Wali Mamadi, the floor is yours.
Very well. Many thanks, first of all, for inviting me for this conference on behalf of Catholic University of Angola, which I'm representing. We are very happy to receive this invitation. I hope that you are listening clearly and no problems of connection. Sometimes internet connections are not good in Africa. So I'll start to talk about the Africa impact from this COVID-19. And this impact will be very strong in terms of political, economical, and social issues. As you may know, Africa has a strong dependence on commodities for export. And in this COVID-19, already they had some difficulties before COVID, but this COVID virus pandemic brought and the reason more aggravatingly these kind of issues. Africa was expected to grow around 3.2%, but now after this COVID, the predictions are about less than 2%. So already African countries have a weak public health systems. There are very poor resources. They already have some issues about food security and other political and ethical and religious problems. So this brings lots of concerns in terms of political risks. I don't know what's happened to my video. Okay. So one of the concerns of COVID-19 that brings to Africa is about political risks. Another concern is about economic issues. As you may know, raw materials or commodities represent 1/3 of export income for countries like Angola, Nigeria, RDC, and other countries. So they are very highly dependent on commodities. For example, for Angola and Nigeria, oil and gas revenues represent 70% of budget for those revenues. So the expected loss that can come from all continents that are dependent on these revenues is around $65 billion of loss for this continent. So these bring huge concerns in terms of economics and social issues. So especially for those countries that are highly dependent on oil and gas and other commodities. On the other hand, we have another note is that Africa is one of the represents the rapid growth in terms of population. As you may know, right now, Africa represents almost 17% of total population. That is around 1.2 billion. In 2040, the population will grow, and Africa will represent around 23%, which will bring to 2 billion people. So it's a huge challenge for these countries, for this continent, with regard to population growth. In terms of economics, reversely, Africa only represents currently 3% of GDP, of total GDP in the world. In 2040, it is estimated to represent only 4%. So this will bring lots of issues about asymmetries, poverty reduction, growth, etc. And the main problem of Africa right now, although it's political, but this crisis will bring some issues with regard to debt, foreign exchange crisis, and especially the foreign direct investment decline. As you may know, globally, we are assisting a new trends in terms of geopolitics. We are assisting bipolarization between China and the US, especially in the trade war, but in the near future will assist a new war in terms of digital revolution. And this brings in another question with regard to geopolitical position for African countries. Which superpower they will choose as a strategic partner? As you may know, China has a strong presence in Africa. They have helped to construct the infrastructure of many African countries. But in reverse, they had help in terms of aid, in terms of debt, but the debt was very backed on the oil and other commodities back payment. So is this good for Africa? Is not good for Africa? So I think it's the moment to think about the model that African countries want to choose in the near future, facing these kind of challenges. Of course, the model should pass through to diversification, but diversification is not easy to do. Diversification needs commitment, needs good governance, needs attraction to investors, and this will bring issues of how officials and governments in African countries should have to attract new investment. As you may know, this geopolitical globally will bring more protectionism, less investment outside. So this will have a huge impact in terms of African countries. Now, talking about manufacturing and other sectors, that's what Africa needs. But for that, Africa needs to invest a lot in infrastructure, a lot in education, a lot in terms of good governance and good institutions. So one of my reflection here is how African countries can bring this kind of investor, bring this kind of technology, bring this kind of qualified people. So this is a huge discussion, but we are having this new trend of digital revolution, and Africa is still very behind in terms of infrastructure, internet investment. So the scenario in the near future is not very optimistic for African countries, but I believe that with the new policies, new measures, new governance, this can bring huge opportunities as well, huge markets for multinational companies, some sectors that can bring a lot of return, a better return than other countries, especially in logistics, infrastructures, and other sectors that can take advantage, like agriculture. So I stay with this note that difficult times are coming to Africa, but also opportunities are coming, and these officials and governors should take advantage of this. Many thanks, and I'm able to any questions in the end that you may have.
Dr. Wali Mamade, thank you very much. Is there any questions? Any question to Professor Wali Mamade? Okay, it seems like we can move to this. Thank you very much. Seems like
wants to talk. I believe so. Okay.
Good afternoon, or good morning, as it were. That was very interesting. Thank you. I just had a quick question. I might have missed it, but did you notice anything about the types of procurement projects that the Chinese are involved in Africa?
Well, what I mentioned is that most of the infrastructure projects in Africa, most of countries, are supported by the Chinese. They give the direct loan, but these loans are backed on commodities. So the way that African countries repay to China, is through the commodities like oil and gas or other minerals. So this kind of model is very now putting in questions if it is benefit for Africa or not, or should Africa try to arrange some other partners and try to arrange some other models of growth. As you may know, this bipolarization between China and the US, especially now, is coming for digital revolution, specifically for 5G, and Africa has a lot of needs to invest in infrastructure, especially in the internet and technology infrastructure. What should be the best partner for Africa? So this is a big question for them. Of course, there are these free trade agreement that the African continent made recently, but there are many challenges for this free trade agreement in the continent. First challenge is about the political will. The second challenge is about the tariff model. So, but this is a way to an alternative, another option, instead of choosing China or US, choose African countries to be together, and they together to choose the best way to partner with the superpowers relations. Okay, so I don't know if I did answer directly to your question, but it's important to know that China is very, very important to Africa. They support it a lot, but the debt of African countries with China is very, very huge. Now, it's a trap. It's a big trap. How to give a solution to that? So that's a big problem for African countries.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Okay, I have one question.
Sure.
So is the question from followers or from panelists?
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay. So this is Kuniaki Yamazu from Yamaguchi University. I have one question. So in the case of the experience in East Asia and Southeast Asia, usually digital economy started after some countries reached industrialization led by manufacturing sector, right? But my question is, in the case of Africa, sub-Saharan African case, so many African countries have not yet realized industrialization led by manufacturing. Even in this case, is it still possible for African countries to realize digital economies without achievement of industrialization? This is my questions. Thank you very much.
Very good question. I'll start to say that one of the big lacks in African countries is about qualified people. And if you talk about digital revolution without qualified people, I'll say how it would be beneficial to African countries without disqualified people. I don't believe that Africa can follow an Asian model for growth. There are 54 countries in Africa with different problems, ethnical, religious, you name it, okay? So it's not possible to be unified and follow an Asian model. Asia took advantage of their investment in education before of their population, and Africa is not taking this advantage. So there is no demographic dividend for Africa, okay? So what we can say is that Africa can take advantage of their attractiveness of investment. If you compare the return they can give with other countries, in this aspect, Africa is very, very attractive. But there are risks. If you want higher return, you have a higher risks, okay? And the major risks are related to political risks, because in this period, in near future, we will have many African countries facing lots of protests if they don't give the right answers to these challenges they will have in terms of economics and social issues. So, responding directly to your question, I think if you want a digital growth, digital-based growth in Africa, you have to attract big companies, and these big companies can give a spillover in internal markets. Okay? Another way is, like I told before, is to all the countries in Africa to join themselves, like they did in the free trade agreement. But there are many challenges here, many challenges. But this is the best for me. It will be the best way to do that. It will take long. It will take very, very long. I'm not saying that is a lost continent. Of course not. I believe that Africa, with their youth, they have a strong asset. But if they're not invested, they will become a liability, a strong liability. So we have to invest in the education, in social capital, in human capital, not only in infrastructure. And this return is a long-term return, not in the short run. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Just economize on time. I want to just straight move to the second speaker today. We started with Africa from Catholic University Angola, Dr. Salim Wali Mamade. I would like to now give the floor to a longtime friend and longtime colleague, Dr. Christian Ochia from Nagoya University. Christian, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali, for the floor. My name is Christian Ochia, and I'm an associate professor at Nagoya University in Japan. I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo, so I think I sort of follow the discussion led by Dr. Salim. But what I would like to stress is that, of course, there are many countries in Africa, but what we could say is we can break those countries into, I would say, three groups. The first one is those countries which have a really good policy stance led by good leadership. And I could cite Tanzania, which is one of the countries, I think it's unknown and underestimated in terms of economic growth. But Tanzania has been developing this kind of manufacturing activity with a lot of good domestic policy and focusing on both domestic and regional market. So in that sense, Tanzania has been growing very fast, reaching actually the I think lower middle income country now. And you can see even the impact in terms of social development if you talk about poverty reduction or even inclusion in terms of inequality. I think Tanzania has done pretty much well in terms of promoting manufacturing-led development using domestic markets and regional markets as a kind of a pedigree. The other group of countries which probably are very popular is countries like Kenya. I will cite Ethiopia and Rwanda. Though those kind of countries have been actually attracting a lot of foreign direct investments. And the case of Kenya and Ethiopia stems from the fact that those countries have actually designed and implemented those kind of industrial park led policy. And if you can look at the case of Ethiopia, for example, Ethiopia used its advantage of location, which is very near like countries like Bangladesh. And if you look at the basic theory of those flying geese theories, meaning that, you know, FDI has been moving away from Asia. You know, if you can go from China, the garment industry moved away to Vietnam. Now, one part went to Cambodia, but go to Bangladesh, and now Ethiopia took advantage of the situation. And one of the, I think the policy that Ethiopia use is those kind of trade policy. And I would say this African, the AGOA with the United States, where Ethiopia attracted mainly Chinese investment at the beginning. But I would say, if you look at the history of Ethiopian industrialization, I think Turkish is, I think, one of the first country that starts bringing FDI in Ethiopia over the last 20 years. And people don't know that, but the first industrial park, which was a kind of, not an international industrial park, what was a cluster near Addis Ababa Bole Airport, was actually designed by Turkish. So, but Chinese took over after that. So meaning that, you know, Ethiopia has been attracting investments mainly to exports. And I think that is the Asian model of economic development where, you know, you invest in skill, and Ethiopia has been actually using a lot of German style of vocational training to attract investment, but also target those kind of export-oriented market. So I think somehow the Asian model of export-oriented economic growth can be seen in some countries in Africa, but of course it's not at the bigger scale as in Asia, because Africa can still compete with Asia in that sense. But I think we have, you know, some impediment of those kind of growth more than in Africa. The last parts of the last group of country is those resource-rich countries. And if you can think about many countries in Central Africa, those countries have took opportunity of this commodity price until 2014, driven by China import of natural resources. Now, if you look at those countries, many of them have tried to diversify the economy. If you look, for example, at Congo, Brazzaville, you will see that that economy is based on oil, but over the last years, they tried to start building a small manufacturing industry, taking advantage of this local and Central African market, which is not that much developed. Now, I agree in the fact that Africa has been trying to promote this local economic integration with this Africa continental free trade area, because many African policymakers believe that, you know, regional trade is much more efficient but safe, especially looking at the unintended effect of COVID. So those countries, of course, are still struggling to sustain their economy in the long term, but I believe that there are many signs, there are many positive signs. If you look at the case of Chad, for example, which has been under political dictatorship for many years, but there is a kind of opening by the leaders of the country to become more FDI friendly, and they're trying to put in place some foreign directed investment policy. Of course, it's not working perfectly, but I think what we have seen over the last 5 years is that there is a kind of a shift in the paradigm among many politicians in Africa, because they were surprised that other countries with similar initial conditions, I will cite Tanzania, Kenya, have been growing very fast and reducing poverty over the last years. So even if you mention the case of Rwanda using tourism and, you know, those kind of bigger conference as a tool for development, it's becoming almost common to see many politicians in Africa trying to imitate the other African countries and using similar policy to enhance economic development. And I hope that this COVID has actually enlightened many politicians, because the discussion, if you look at most of the discussion among high-level discussion, I think that the talk or the debate is about how do you promote regional integration and how do you target domestic markets. And if you will look at the data, we know that this complementarity index, like the trade complementarity index among many African countries, is very low, meaning that African countries do not trade each other. And of course, there comes the issue of investments. How do you invest in infrastructure to unlock the potential of trade? And how do you build skill? Because most of the African countries produce and export similar commodity. How do you enhance structural transformation so that countries can take advantage of domestic market? And I will finish by saying that some other countries, as I mentioned, the case of Tanzania, has been taking advantage of this domestic market to industrialize. South Africa, if you look at most of the convenience store in many African countries, they are actually filled by South African manufactured product, which means that there are markets, there are opportunity, and some countries have been taking advantage of that. And policymakers in many other countries are aware of the situation, and many of them are trying to implement strong policy, especially to attract investment. And I will stress that many of them are trying to attract investment outside of natural resources. And if you look at the case of DRC or the case of Chad, the policy has been, how do you attract investment away from natural resources? Because China, I think, has done tremendous effort, especially to reduce risk in Africa. If you see the way Chinese investment is going to Africa, it's going in terms of clusters. So there is no risk of war, of conflict, even of policy mismanagement, because the Chinese have actually learned how to manage those risks in a very easy way. So therefore, attracting investment in manufacturing sector, I think, is one of the challenges in many African countries. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for the very, very compact and very insightful presentation, as usual. Any questions? Professor Amatsu has spent quite some time in Tanzania. I guess maybe he has some comments or questions.
Yes. So thank you very much. And thank you very much. So Dr. Ocha, nice presentation and a nice, very compact presentation and very informative regarding the recent Africans industrialization process. I was in Tanzania from 2014 to 2018. Therefore, only 2 years half, so just passed since then. Yes, but Tanzania is a bit controversial, maybe. So at least when I was in there around 2 years and a half before, Tanzania government created many challenges in relation with foreign direct investment, as well as domestic investors. Their business environment, of course, Tanzanian government tries to improve on the best effort basis, but still many challenges remain there at the time. For example, business environment is not certain and not predictable and not consistent among the relevant policy measures for foreign and domestic investors. Therefore, so at least 2 years and a half before, but it is not easy for many investors to predict the future, a bright future of Tanzania's manufacturing sectors. But of course, as you said, so many potential, including the domestic market and the current good achievement of poverty reduction under their geographical location, so around the Indian Ocean. I think they have a big potential as far as they can improve the policy environment and policy directions and policy implementation practices. Thank you very much.
Just to maybe to second that, I think one of the good signal that the government of Tanzania has sent over the last 2 years is that the president did not make any international travel over the last 2 years, arguing that that money will be used to reinvest in the country. And the only trip he made, I think, was in Ethiopia to attend some kind of AU meeting. So I think, of course, there is, if you look at the changes, I think there is a good, I would say goodwill, because that's what I think Dr. Salim talked about. If you compare Africa 10 years or 15 years ago, I think most of the government did not put that kind of developmental model in the front line. And recently you see many of them are talking about those policy goals and doing some actions to sort of back up their say. And I think that is really a positive sign moving forward.
Yes, I'm very glad to hear that, because this is a very big improvement in the past 2 years and a half, according to you. Thank you very much. Good news.
May I ask one question, Ali?
Yeah.
Yeah, Professor Christian Yusof, I'm Yusof from Malaysia. It was 15 years ago when I was in the Netherlands. We had a small workshop. So then we had a representative from African country. So it was 15 years ago when the participants or the delegate from Africa saying that industrial policy, in particular on the manufacturing, for the manufacturing sector, may work well in Asian part, but when you try to bring to the Africans, it might not work in Africa. So you said that some manufacturing sectors work well in Africa. If I understand correctly what you mentioned a few minutes ago. If that is the case, could you share with us whether we have to Asian-based manufacturing policy should be adjusted, or we can the same policy might work well in some places in Africa?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very nice insight. There is a discussion. I think I wrote a paper about whether the Asian tiger can follow the African lion, if the African lion can follow the Asian tiger. So there is a big discussion whether Africa should apply the Asian economic industrial policy. I think we can discuss about that somehow. But I think what is important is there are many lessons that we can learn. And I think Professor Dr. Ali wrote a book about this industrial policy in East Asia. And actually, I've learned a lot from his book. But what you can learn, I think, from those kind of publication is that there are good policy that can be implemented. If you look at the case of Rwanda, for example, Rwanda has been following the model of Singapore. And they have invested somehow to sort of mimic those kind of economic development. If you look at Ethiopia, in terms of industrial human resources, they put together the Korean model, the German model, and somehow the Chinese model. And in terms of the industrial productivity, they're using the Japanese Kaizen, the 5S model developed by Toyota. So, which means that African countries are implementing similar policy that has been developed in Asia, and of course, that has been successful. Now, the question is, to address your question directly about manufacturing, I can retorque a question to you. Who import manufacturing product in Africa? The importers, most of the time, are military generals of the army. There are politicians or those elites which are backed up by politicians. So therefore, if you think about manufacturing in Africa, one of the first policy I've been recommending to many governments is we should actually break down those in Japan. I think we had a long time ago that what we call a zaibatsu, which means a kind of a conglomerate that sort of dominate the economy. In Chad, for example, I worked on designing this agro-industrial development plan. And of course, when we discuss about the policy, I think one question was that, do you know who imports manufactured product in this country? It's the general of the army. So meaning that if you want to invest in manufacturing, you'll have troubles. And I'm speaking here, because it's an academic stage, but that's what happened in reality. So therefore, sometimes any policy may not be very effective because you have those kind of constraints from the political or from the elites that are trying to capture those interests. Now, in Ethiopia, what the government tried to do is they try to fight against those kind of corruption. And they establish really transparent policy in order to help, reduce those kind of, I would say, non-tariff barrier in terms of corruption, in terms of importing. So my response could be that, the problem is not that there is no opportunity. There is a huge market in Africa in terms of manufacturing product. If you look at the import bill, it has been increasing more than, I think, 200% if you compare to the 1970s, 1980s. So which means that there is a huge demand, but there is an elite who is capturing those kind of benefits. And one of the policy is if we can break down those kind of importers. For example, in DRC, it's only 2 companies which import almost 70% of the total manufacture, the food imports, only by 2 or 3 companies. And 2 of them are actually close with the political, the political elite. So in that case, it's really difficult to develop an autonomous manufacturing sector. And countries in Africa, we have tried to develop a manufacturing sector. They usually start by dislocating those kind of elite capture.
Thank you very much. I think it's time we move to the next speaker. So from Africa, we're moving to Asia, East Asia. So Africa has always been an area of interest to many researchers. In my case, I have a PhD student who's now studying industrialization in Africa from Capo Verde. I think he was very much looking forward to this conference today, and he must be very happy that I believe he learned a lot from the first two speakers today. Thank you very much to a gentleman from Africa. So now I want to give the floor to another longtime friend, longtime colleague, Professor Mohammed Yusuf Sari from University Putra, Malaysia. Yusuf, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Ali. Colleagues, okay, given the limited time that we have, so I would like to share with the audience here two aspects regarding the industrial development in Malaysia. The first one actually start for next year, 2021 to 2030. Yeah, 2030, our development planning regarding the industrial development will be guided by the new industrial master plan. Yeah, because our third Malaysia industrial master plan started on 2006 up to until this year, almost end. So I would like to share some of our research that we have conducted for this year. Specifically, we assess the performance of industries in the third industrial master plan, and then this assessment actually, or this exercise or this project actually, we passed or we conducted specifically for the use of Ministry of International Trade and Industry in Malaysia. The second thing I would like to share is that the recovery and reform area for the post-COVID-19, this area, I'll try to highlight key, at least I think 8 areas, yeah, has been, is expected to be the focus area for 2021 and beyond, I think beyond up to 2030. So this is so-called this recovery and reform areas or reform plan in Malaysia. Let me start with the number one first. I would like to share 3 issues here, or 3 to me is important finding to be shared with international colleagues here with respect to the performance of our industry in the third industrial master plans. Yeah. Number one, what we observe, I think quite interesting, is that we know that Malaysia is one of the developing countries in Asian region struggling and facing the issue of income inequality, basically distribution of income with respect to the among races and among ethnic group, among geographical location, rural and urban areas. Yeah. And then we assess actually economic has grown, has moved forward, and then industrial sectors also improve. I mean, growth in over time. However, yeah, what we found is that for the resource-based manufacturing, for total value added created by the resource-based manufacturing sectors, only 29% goes to labor income. So the others goes to capital income, basically profit, etc. And for non-resource-based, it was better compared to resource-based, because 44% of the total value added attributed to the labor income. More or less the similar percentage goes to the services sector. In total, we can see here the distribution of value added or distribution from the growth for the industry in the third industrial master plan. Not really, I would say that not really equal with respect to if we compare the one that received by the labor and the one that received by the entrepreneurs or the capital or the capital income. The second point here is that I think this is also common for many developing countries. Yeah, there is a considerably low spillover effects between micro, small, and medium enterprises compared to large enterprises. Yeah. In this assessment, what we conducted a simulation exercise. Yeah. For resource-based, actually, the growth in large sector, let's say growth in 1 billion or 1 million, any numbers, actually only 35% will goes to or will benefit the micro, small, and medium enterprises for resource-based sector. For services, yeah, services about only 40% from the benefit which goes to micro, small, and medium enterprises. So altogether, this is the case where most of the growth will benefit by the large within the large sectors, but less benefit or less growth to the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So it's like it seems to be that we have less connected, yeah, or loose linkages between micro, small, and medium, and large enterprises. It seems to be that the large enterprises, they are strong within the large firm and quite isolated compared to micro, small, and medium enterprises. The third point I would like to share is that about the global value chains. Yeah, we compare our Malaysian condition or Malaysian position 2005 and 2015, about 10 years. Actually, on average, yeah, our GBC participation has declined between 2005 and 2015. Yeah, from 34% to 21%. Altogether, or on average, we found that Malaysia is located in the middle of the value chains, particularly for non-resource-based sector that relatively exhibits higher foreign value added. So even the latest report by the cannot remember, by the United Nations, if I'm not mistaken, about the GBC report, basically GBC report, partly also contributed by the IDE, Institute of Developing Economies from Japan, JETRO. Clearly show that we did not improve our positions. Even we did not improve the length of forward linkages with respect to global value chains. Yeah. Moving forward, yeah, we propose 4 policies that the government should focus. Yeah, the first one is strengthening the industrial linkages. One of the strategies that we propose that to increase economic integration between services and export-oriented subsectors, and by empowering local supply chains network to produce high value and sophisticated products. Yeah. The second issues, or the second area for recommendation is we ask government to improve labor market conditions. We want, for example, we want to make sure or to ensure that when investment come to Malaysia, the investment type or the investment technology that they bring should also reflect the stock of talent that we have. For example, that if we have more skilled workers, then should the FDI or foreign direct investment should be also investment that require more skilled workers. We don't want to have currently we have mismatch. On one hand, we have more skilled workers, but on the other hand, we are promoting more labor-intensive investment, foreign direct investment. Yeah. The third area of our recommendation is to upgrade the global value chains. There are many strategies that government can be can consider to upgrade our position in the global value chains. For example, promote servicification in the manufacturing activity by providing a support function to high value services. So I don't have time, I think, to discuss a detail the strategies for upgrading the value chain. I think most of the people can get the sense of this recommendation. Last one is to empowering micro, small, and medium enterprises. So this is one of our recommendation is to review the special economic zones policy to ensure benefit to the local economy can be maximized. One of the output that we found in this assessment is that on one hand, we promote industries in special economic zones such as free industrial zone, but the spillover benefit the industry that located in the free industrial zone to the local companies or local firm is very low. So we want to improve these linkages between industry that located in the free industrial zone or special economic zone with the outside the free special economic zone. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm go to my second part. Actually, post COVID-19 economic development in Malaysia. Actually, moving forward for year 2021 and up to 2030, our focus is on 4 aspects. One is business, people, economy, and environment. Basically, these 4 aspects actually is very in line with the sustainability pillars. Yeah, we want to ensure that we improve living standard, protect the job and livelihood for the people. At the same time, for the economy, we want to restore stability, building resilience, and then also to creating economic sophistication and complexity and competitiveness. For business, we want to restore the supply chain and also looking for new area for economic growth. Of course, economics, people and business should not sacrifice the environment. So moving forward, we want to make sure that our economy is also growth in line with the green economy. And we have set about 4 reform areas, yeah, for the post-COVID-19. So number 1 is future workforce. We want to ensure that we the supply of workforce actually can have a better match with the demand of the workforce. I mean, from industrial perspective. We want the second area is digital economy and fourth, industrial revolution. Number 3 is on globalizations. We have in the policy discussion in Malaysia in the past few months is people are worrying whether this COVID-19 pandemic will change the international hub and also will change the route of the supply of global value chains or global supply chains. Number 4, advanced technology. We want to, this is common in any country, we want to ensure that we are moving or we are growth with technology driven. And number 5, public institution and governance. We want to reform the public institution and governance to make sure that they are more efficient and get ready to support the future economic growth. Regulation and market. We want to ensure that or we want to encourage a constant innovation and improve consumer welfare. And then we are looking what are the regulatory approach that can bring best outcome, better outcome for the growth. Number 7, post-modernization and new socio-culture. We are expecting that post-COVID-19 will change the way we live, the way we have contact, or the way we cultural and social, etc. So we want to ensure that the new so-called new social culture be part of the new economic growth of future. And then lastly, distributed growth and sustainability. Of course, we want to ensure that all the reform plan or recovery plan for the post-COVID-19 should be sustainable. And of course, at the end, we want to ensure that the benefits of the growth equally distributed across all the population in Malaysia. That's all from input from Malaysia. I would that I can share with you, given the limited time. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think we can take just one question, and actually, the remaining two speakers today, Dr. Tao and Amatsu Sensei, I would like to ask you to do your best to keep your presentation short, because it looks like it's getting quite late in Turkey. It's already late in Japan, but it's getting late in Turkey too, so we're running very short.
Yeah. In fact, Ali, for your information, because I actually have to leave soon, because tonight Malaysian government imposed movement control order, so everybody must be at home before 12 o'clock. Otherwise, you are in trouble.
Okay. Maybe is there any question? Just one short question for Yusuf.
Yeah, maybe a very short question. I know there, in Asia, there is a tremendous competition in attracting FDI. And, you have Indonesia, Vietnam, most of those countries, and Thailand, they has been competing in attracting investment. My question is, Dr. Yusuf mentioned about establishing some special economic zones. I want to know in which sector, what kind of product, because I know the high-tech industry has been moving away from, many countries. The manufacturing of automobile has been, booming in Vietnam. Thailand has been attracting a lot of processed food industry. So my question is, what are the industry that Malaysia wants to attract?
Recently, previously, we depend on the FDI related to electric and electronics. Yeah, the electric and electronic FDI that not really high end, but more on labor intensive. Moving forward now, we are more interested. We try to attract more like a technological driven FDI, more advanced. We are looking for investment in advanced technology, and also we are thinking that moving a bit diversification in terms of FDI. We may no longer dependent on electric and electronic type of FDI. So we are looking for FDI in services, for example, and also manufacturing, agriculture sectors. But actually this year, last few months, the government is expected to launch the new industrial master plan. So because of COVID-19, so they're postponing, I think, by next year. Otherwise, we have more information about the new direction of the Malaysian industrial development for the next 10 years. At this moment, we do not know yet.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to move forward
can I leave you guys? So nice to meet you, because I'm catching the times.
Of course, follow the regulations. Yeah, we will.
Thank you very much, Ali and colleagues. See you again. Bye.
Thank you. And the remaining two speakers are from Yamaguchi University, well, actually, I would call it my home institution. So I would like to move to Dr. Tao Dang. She has just recently received her PhD degree from Yamaguchi University. Tao-san, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
so yes. Yeah, so I will start now.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Can you see my yes? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so good afternoon. So it's my honor to present a SEPIP today about the history of industrial policies in Vietnam. So before 1986, Vietnam was a central planned economy. At that time, we had a specific industrialization plan, which mainly focused on heavy industry, similarly to the model of the former Soviet Union. However, due to the ineffective economic system and many policy mistakes, by the end of the 1980s, Vietnam faced what even the Communist Party had to admit as a comprehensive social and economic crisis. Our industrialization plan will fail. Consumer products were lacking and hyperinflation went rampant. Still in that period, there were some positive legacies that allow us to grow quickly later on. First, the literacy rate would improve significantly from 5% in 1945 to 90% by the late of 1980s. Second, Vietnamese women highly engaged in the labor force due to the wartime policies. Women were encouraged to work to compensate their male counterpart who were sent to the frontier. Even now, our female labor force participant rate is very high, 79%, one of the highest rates in the world. And third, we received many technical assistance from the former Soviet Union, especially in electricity infrastructure, mining, and human resources. Actually, many big Vietnamese entrepreneurs nowadays were trained in the Soviet Union before. So by 1986, the pressure for reform had become intense. However, Lejeune, the first figure of the Communist Party at that time, was very conservative. He was a Stalinist who strongly opposed to the privatization. Only after his death, Trường Trinh, the second figure of the party, can initiate the reform. And his successor, Nguyễn Văn Linh, cleared the political objection to the new economic agenda, the so-called đổi mới, which means reform in Vietnamese. Then the framework of reform was set up by Prime Minister Võ Văn Kiệt, who was regarded as the reformist or the reform architect. For the first time, Communist Party accept the non-state sectors besides the state sector in a multi-sector commodity producing economy. Vietnam also appreciated and follow market economy principle. However, the communist ideology was preserved in politics. In the next 34 years, Vietnamese top leader has strong impacts on the cost of the economic reform, especially who held the post of Prime Minister. Here, I would like to review the remarks of some more significant figures. Võ Văn Kiệt was the most remarkable reformist. He was the father of various new economic programs. Some of his most significant contributions to the industrialization of Vietnam can be named as a giant project to upgrade electricity and transportation system in the whole nation. And the normalization of relations with the United States, the establishment of two big national university to train human resource in technology and science, and the formation of many policy frameworks which supported the private sector and the privatization of state-owned enterprises, and the release of many regional economic schemes. Another key figure of this period of reform is Đỗ Mười. He was successful to reduce the hyperinflation by pushing up reform in the government budget and banking system. Thus, the economy could have the stability for development. However, Đỗ Mười was a political conservative. He was skeptical of many economic plans proposed by Võ Văn Kiệt. And Phan Văn Khải was Võ Văn Kiet's successor. He continued to implement Kiet's strategy. During his prime minister term, he greatly supported independent technocrats to contribute to policy formulation. He also facilitated the state-business relationship by opening channels for businesses to voice their concern and suggestion to policymakers. The next Prime Minister is Milton Friedman. He remarked his power with the Vietnam membership in WTO, making Vietnam a highly open economy. However, his favor to giant state-owned economic groups and some big private companies had created the so-called socialist cronyism, a big problem of Vietnam economy. With his governance, corruption became rampant and vested interest groups grew more powerful. And the current Prime Minister is Nguyễn Phúc. He is very desirous of high economic record. He always set a very ambitious goal for the growth rate. However, he seemed to be less concerned about social and environmental externalities of the quick economic development. When we talk about Vietnam industrial policy, actually that is a make-up policy. Vietnam has a master plan for industrialization, and the most version is 2014. However, there are not many policies focusing only in the industry sector. Instead, policy which have the most influence on the industrialization progress of Vietnam are those facilitating the reform of the whole economies. They can be divided into several catalogs as the follows. The first and the most important group is the overall framework of incentive for businesses regardless of ownership type. And the key policy of this catalogs are the 5 versions of enterprise law from 2019 to 2020. From 1990, the 5 versions of enterprise law from 1990 to 2020. Among the 5 versions, the first 2 are considered as a breakthrough. The 1990 law legalized the status of the non-state sector in the economy, while the 1990 law gave private firms the freedom to participate in all unprohibited economic activities. Meanwhile, the 3 later versions seem to be less innovative. The second is the regulation connecting with Vietnam membership in the WTO. Ironically, this regulation has somewhat helped to level the playing field for domestic firms because in Vietnam, there's still the discrimination among ownership types. SOE comes first, followed by foreign invested firm, and domestic firm come last. The third group is policies supporting the reform effort in the banking system and education system. While the banking system has a significant achievement in maintaining macroeconomic stability, the education reform in Vietnam is relatively slow to meet the increasing demand for high quality human resource. Next is policies paving the way for privatization of SOE. This process in Vietnam is similar to the strategy grab the big, let go the small of China. Actually, due to historic and ideological reasons, Vietnam governments always favor SOE. The equitization of SOE is slow, and many SOEs avoided it by integrated into business groups and conglomerates. The last catalog is rules targeting a specific ownership sector. There are many policies that provide special favor to state-owned enterprise and foreign direct investment firms. Even under the requirement of WTO, Vietnam has still managed to enhance its favorite sectors, and only recently, small and medium enterprise has got more notice, and there are some new policies especially address their need. Overall, the involvement of Vietnam industrial policy often reflects the result of the external pressure for change and the internal debates inside the Vietnam Communist Party. So far, the country has been successful in maintaining scope for highly interventionist policies, even under increasing integration pressure. With that set of policy, Vietnam have achieved much economic success since đổi mới. Our real GDP has increased by 5 times. The graph this graph shows very clearly the export-led growth strategy embraced by the government. Since 2015, the value of export has outweighed GDP. The industry sector has important contribution to the overall economic performance. Industry value added went up significantly from a near zero level. The rate of manufacturing goods in export had leaped from 42% to 85% in the last 2 decades. However, when we look closer into the share of industry in the GDP, we can see the warning sign of the premature de-industrialization phenomenon. In the New East Agenda in 2014, the government set the target for the industry sector to account for 42% of GDP by 2020. However, Vietnamese industrialization suffered a lot after the financial crisis, and its share in GDP has only increased slightly in the last 10 years, and now it's still below 35%. So it's quite far from the target set by the government. And many researchers believe that the root cause is the unwillingness of the government to let go the ineffective state sector and the hesitancy to treat domestic private sector equally. This graph shows the relative importance of the 3 ownership sectors in đổi mới. The foreign investment sector has been welcomed by the government and quickly taken the top place in the industry. However, it has been caught up by the domestic private group. The private group now is the biggest contributor in both GDP and job creation. Meanwhile, although state investment for SOE remain very high, the contribution of SOE has dropped sharply in all aspects. This means SOE is becoming less and less competitive in comparison with other ownership types, while they still demand a high amount of public investment. The roadmap for Vietnam industrialization still have many challenges. Kenichi Ono stated that Vietnam achievements so far have mainly caused by one-time liberalization effects and new trade opportunity rather than its internal strength. And he also warned about the middle income trap when a developing country fails to internalize skill and technology from FDI to move to the next stage of industrialization. Besides, increasing social and environmental problems is reducing the development quality of Vietnam. And moreover, socialist cronyism has grown more powerful in the economy, threatening a healthier business environment. Last but not least, Vietnam is still lack of a realistic industrial strategy and a concrete action plan. There are many problems in the process of policy formulation. One could be mentioned is the government trap. That means the environment of low efficiency, low morale, and low salary discourage talented people from working for the government. That is the brain drain in the public sector. Then it becomes a vicious circle when there are not enough qualified people to make good policy. So if Vietnam want to push up its industrialization process, it needs to overcome the mentionable obstacle. And Vietnam leaders have to be more determined in pursuing deeper reform and cast off the irrational fear that a strong private sector will challenge the Communist Party's power. They should push forward public sector renovation and empower independent technocrats to participate in policy formulation. And I think that Vietnam also should pay more attention to sustainable development to make the fruit of economic success benefit everyone. So that is my presentation today, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm getting warnings from the organization committee. It looks like our time is already up. So I want to just leave more to Professor Amatsu. Amatsu Sensei, you have not more than 10 minutes. Can you just wrap it up in 10 minutes? I hate to say this, but is it okay?
It's okay. So my target is within 10 minutes because you have a more formal session to the last end of today's session. Okay, can I start?
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay. I prepared so many slides of the PowerPoint, but I will be brief. So as much as possible, my target is 10 minutes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kuniaki Yamatsu, Yamaguchi University. But originally, so I came from JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, before April this year. So I was in JICA. Then, so my interest is so learning states, state learning, because Stiglitz argued learning society, but my point is not society, but states, government. So according to this World Development Indicator series, so it is very obvious that for East Asia and Southeast Asia countries and Sub-Saharan African countries make a very different achievement of manufacturing or industrialization. So why are these differences occurred? This is my very simple question. So if some countries, for example, Africa or other low-income countries, failed the industrialization process, we can assume 4 issues, 4 errors or 4 failures. So first error is industrial targeting, probably. This is probably for early comers, early industrialization countries. Usually they have mistakes. The setting is unrealistic and ambitious industrial targeting. It means the selection of the priority industry will be made a mistake. This is the first possibilities. A second possibility is market selection. So for example, so some countries make failure of selecting the target market, domestic or external. So this is represented by import substitution strategy or export-oriented strategy. A third possible failure is expected leading actors. Some countries would expect the state-owned enterprise to take the lead in the manufacturing sector, manufacturing development. And other countries would expect the private sector to do so. And fourth possible failure is the relevance of concrete policy instrument and its implementation, including the uncertainty and predictability and inconsistency among the relevant policy measures. But how should we interpret these failures? This is very important issues. I further summarize the 2 failures out of these 4 failures. So first big failure is industrialization vision failures. And the second failure is policy making practices failures. We can summarize these 4 failures into these 2 failures. Why this happened? This is my simple question. I assume this framework. Usually government, including the state leaders and Minister of Industries, to try to do their thought into the very concrete policy measures, they follow this process. According to John Maynard Keynes, so every people will be influenced by existing economics thoughts or theories. In that sense, when state leaders and Minister of Industries formulate their industrialization vision, they will be affected by existing economic development theories and arguments, and sometimes the experiences of other countries' industrialization. Then, after they formulated vision of industrialization, they develop the strategy like import substitution strategy or export-oriented industrial strategy for operationalizing those formulated vision. And after that, they design and implement concrete policy instrument. So out of this flows, where is a breaking point? Where is a breaking point for failures or success? This is a very important point. I assume 2 possible points. So first one is the stage in between economic development theories and vision formulation. So I can call this vision formulation process. A second possible failure in the breaking points for success and failure countries is from strategies to policy instrument. I can call this policy making practices. So in this two stage, so probably success countries can manage very successfully this, but failed countries would make fail to conversion this. This is the assumption. And so ideally, as for the industrialization vision, ideally, so industrialization vision should be formulated based on reality of the industrial sectors, not based on expectation or desire and illusion of the state leaders and ministers of industry. But usually, so in the failed countries, so industrialization vision, so often to formulate based on the expectation, desire, and illusion, not based on reality of the industrial sector. Therefore, ideal situation of industrialization formation and failed situation is very big difference or very big gap. When it comes to the policy making practices, that should be formulated and implemented based on reality of the industrial sector or industrial entrepreneurs and with the industrial entrepreneur perspective. But sometimes, so failed countries try to conduct these policy-making practices based on expectation and desire and illusion, and with the state views. So as a state, what kind of the policy framework do they want in the future? This is a very mixed way. Therefore, so in the initial stage, so there are very big gap in terms of the industrialization vision formulation and policy-making practices. But some countries could do this in the case of the successful industrialized Asian countries. But other cases, so failed countries could not do so. It means we can say this is a state capability problems. And also, even in the case of the successful industrialized countries, so in the initial stage of their industrialization, they could not do so. They have a very big gap for these two issues. In that sense, we can say this is a learning process. Then, so we consider, I can consider, essence here is countries who cannot reduce the gap in the early industrialization stage would fail or need to spend a longer period for industrialization process. This is my assumption. And to interpret this situation around, so I assume this basic framework. Every country confront some type of the initial conditions, and every countries can produce some output, reducing the gap for industrialization vision and policy making practices. But to connect this initial condition and outcome, they have some learning mechanism. Then so we can divide it. So learning factors for vision formulation and learning factors for policy making practices. Then, according to the past experiences of East Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries, we can summarize, so roughly or preliminary. So as for the vision formulation, the successfully learning state leaders and the Ministry of Industry were strongly interested in industry itself and individual industries and had a strong appetite of learning from experiences of other countries. This is the first point. The second point is, so they struggled for accumulation of industrial knowledge and skills and creation of pool of engineering technocrats within the states. A third important point is they had a sense of economic rationalities as a decision-making criteria. They are free from ideological thinking. And as for the policy-making practices, successful learning state leaders and the Ministry of Industries were strongly interested in strong appetite in watching and listening to the reality and voices of industrial entrepreneurs. They are ready to face to the industrial entrepreneurs. A second point is factors of engineering technocrats are the same as the learning factors of vision formation. And so by so doing, so state came to be able to communicate with the industrial entrepreneurs by using the same common language and common logic. And third point is functioning state-business relationship and institution setting. This is very important. So establishment of de jure framework is much easier for any countries as far as they can receive the external support from donors. But making them function well, this is very important challenge and big difference. Last point is, I'll skip this. Last point from the perspective from the recent arguments about industrialization and de-industrialization in sub-Saharan African countries. Recently, so there are many arguments about these issues, right? Some people say the experiences of East and Southeast Asian economies would not be applicable to this region. We already discussed here in this panel discussion. I think this statement must be true to some extent, but that this is not true to some extent, because the essence of the learning states I raised in this presentation is still applicable beyond the difference of regions and pathway of industrialization. Regardless of the pathway of industrialization and de-industrialization, the state leaders must be strongly interested in the priority industry or sectors, and they must have a strong appetite of learning from other countries. And also they should accumulate, or they should struggle to accumulate the technocrats with a strong background relating to this priority industry. This is a common features regardless of the different pathways. A key point here is whether or not state leaders and the Ministry of Industry can consider based on the reality of industrial sector and industrial entrepreneurs with industrial entrepreneur views, not from the state views. This is very important. Otherwise, reducing the gap in industrialization vision and policy-making practices are not easy task for any countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants here today, all five speakers. Next in the agenda is actually Travis. Travis, I'm terribly sorry for the delay, and Professor Guillermo Rosenbursa is also waiting. I would like to just stop here, and if you have any questions, please ask the presenters directly, or you can just direct your questions to me. I will share with the presenters. So thank you very much for your participation and also for your patience.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Teşekkür ediyoruz. Japonya'nın Yamaguchi Profesör Doktor Ali Akkemik moderatörlüğünde bu oturumu tamamladı. Teşekkür ederiz hocam. Evet, şimdi 8. oturum için Profesör Doktor Travis Tyler. Kendisi burada mı?
Şu anda bağlı.
Professor Tyler?
Yes, hello.
You are welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Can I share my screen and present?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
If you are ready, we can start.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Let me see.
You have 15 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful. All right. In the interest of time, do I have 15 minutes or 20 minutes?
15.
15? Okay. Let me know if I'm getting close to the end. I'll set my alarm here as well. Hold on a second. Okay. Let me see. Just a second. Okay. I'm delighted to be here, everyone. Thank you for coming to the session this afternoon in Turkey. I'm obviously dialing in from the United States, and welcome to our friends in other parts of the world. You know, it's a delight. I was super excited to come to OSTİM Technical University this year, but because of COVID, we couldn't make it. But I certainly look forward to visiting this wonderful university in the future. And special thanks to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Murat Yulik, for helping to arrange this excellent conference. Already enjoying some of the sessions this morning. So in the interest of time, let me get right to the topic at hand. This is a historical-based paper on misconceptions of U.S. trade and industrial policy and the influence of neoliberalism, work that I was doing with a research assistant at my university here in Virginia, the United States. And I'll go fairly quickly through some of the historical elements because I feel like many of you already have some background in that area. And instead, I will spend a little bit more time disproportionately on what I see as more of the unique contributions of this paper regarding the education system in the United States and the rise of neoliberalism. But let me just give you some background information. So I want to, in this paper, we assess the role of the state in U.S. trade and industrial policy history. We clarify the U.S. economic development record by debunking several myths, some common myths that are oftentimes purported in the press and even in academic circles. And we examine the emergence and the influence of neoliberal economics in the modern era. And some of you will be happy, some of you will be disappointed. I don't have a lot. I think I only have one slide that includes regressions in this presentation. So instead, I'm using the German historical school methodology that leverages experiences from history, institutional economics, and theory to develop cases. So what's some background? Well, many of you, my foreign friends, you probably know that the United States has long been noted for its free market economic system. It's generally thought of as fairly laissez-faire in terms of government policies and championing of free trade, kind of like a Horatio Alger view of economic development as it's often portrayed in the US of rags to riches, you know, whereby the colonists and the settlers came over and they worked hard and through atomistic exchange and hard work and production, we became the economic power that it is today. That's not altogether accurate. So I wanted to provide a more nuanced view in this paper. It does parallel to what happened with Great Britain. Having said all that, it is, you know, a caveat I'll just state up front is it's very difficult to determine causal inference in long-run development, but we can draw on theory and history to clarify the record to better understand what types of activities are growth promoting and those that are not. So when we think of Smithian and Ricardian Economics 101, what do we teach our intro students? What do you know, fairly reasonably informed citizens? What do they hear about oftentimes in the popular press? It's oftentimes based off of the classical view of U.S. economic history. You know, some of these tenets would be Smithian benefits of unfettered free market competition, private property rights, right, and minimal role of government. In this view, government is oftentimes seen as more combative with the free market rather than complementary. So to the extent that the government can set the rules of the game, enforce contract law, protect private property, national defense. Other than that, more or less get out, right? That's this view. Large resource endowment, right? Everyone would probably agree that relative to most countries, the United States, in terms of its acreage and the different regions of the United States early on and today, we benefit from relatively large resource endowments. According to the classical view, of course, from Ricardo and company, in the 1800s, the United States would follow its comparative advantage in agriculture. And that would be like on the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, that would be as if the Koreans in the 1960s, after establishing their wig industry, right, with the fake hair, well, the real hair, and then becoming a massive exporter of hair. According to the classical view of comparative advantage, the Koreans would have then, via comparative advantage or stepwise or latent comparative advantage, they would then proceed to something, you know, perhaps a little bit higher value added, a little bit higher tech, but tethered, right, somehow connected to the Whig industry. And so the idea was that the Koreans would not jump into heavy and chemical industries, for example, like they did, or shipbuilding like they did. And so according to the classical view of the United States, the colonies should not have been tinkering too much with technology and electronics, but should have, you know, more or less just stayed in agriculture to take advantage of that large resource endowment, and then engage in free trade. Whoops. Okay. And if you look at the United States data record as far as real GDP per capita, it's not that interesting as far as the 1800s are concerned, right? It's just, it's steadily increasing. And then it picks up here. Sometimes the logarithm scale is helpful. So you can see how fairly consistent U.S. economic growth has been over the history of the country, save for the time of the Great Depression, for example, in the 1930s. So we have to get to the more the granular and case study level to discover, you know, what's behind these numbers, what's going on. And so in this paper, I try to talk about some of the claims for trade policy and industrial policy. And after delving into a lot of the literature and researching this topic, we can contrast that with the reality. So one claim, for example, is that Adam Smith only advocated for free trade. And that's simply not true. Smith actually, before the term strategic trade policy became as accepted and hot in usage as it is today in the economics profession, Smith was very well aware of the fact that if Great Britain were to not protect certain select industries, or not, if Great Britain were not to discourage the United States from pursuing types of industries that are a little bit higher up the value chain, then Great Britain might lose some of its dynamic comparative advantage over time. Another claim is that the US industrialized via free trade policies. But if you look at the tariff record of the United States in the 19th century, that's simply not true. So for example, if you look at this chart, the United States is the top gray line. And so you see here, during some of America's most important growth years of the 19th century, really from 1860 till the 1920s, America had a relatively high tax rate. And here you have US averaged a different view of it, but this identifies some of the common types of tariffs that were used. And so you can see that most people in the United States have heard about the disastrous Smoot-Hawley tariff as a response to the Great Depression in 1930, but most people in the United States are not aware of the high tariffs in the 19th century that helped spur the development of key industries like cotton, for example, and commercial vessel sailing, for example. Another thing that I go into detail, I don't have too much time today, but is this famous quotation from a high-level economist in the White House, in the Council of Economic Advisors. His name was Michael Boskin, and Boskin famously said in the 1980s that, well, we are more inclined to follow neoliberal and neoclassical principles. We don't believe in strategic trade policy. We don't believe in industrial policy. And so, frankly, according to the hardcore neoclassical view, which I disagree with, Boskin said, it doesn't matter if we specialize and have comparative advantage in potato chips or computer chips. And of course, if you look at some of the key work that's been done, for example, I highlight Hausman, Huang, and Roderick here, that they did in fact find that the countries that they found a causal relationship, that the countries that were engaging in more higher value added exports actually tended to do better. So it does matter whether it's potato chips or computer chips. Another critique is that the recent East Asian trade policy experience is unique, but much of the East Asian trade policy and the developmental model is based off of people like Alexander Hamilton and Lee and List and Henry Clay's American system. So in the interest of time, let me just jump to some of these other things. The claim is that what industrial policy? There is no industrial policy in the US. There's a panel discussion tomorrow, so I'll save more of the details of the American industrial policy in practice for tomorrow. But you know, some of the reality of America's use of industrial policy, while it's not an overarching policy, I call it more of an ad hoc policy, which I think is a little bit of a downfall of the American model. But there has been industrial policy and it has contributed to development. My particular expertise is public procurement and international contracting, offsets and counter trade. And so that last item, public procurement and the Buy America policy for public procurement, is of particular interest to me. So the implied development model features can be outlined and separated into those two categories. I would call the Michael Boskin, you know, the potato chips or the microchips, to be the neoliberal or neoclassical column here, where the focus is on the individual or the firm, as opposed to the Hamiltonian or statist, which is the industry. And then the different view of government is more complementary under the Hamilton view versus combative and the provision of public goods and the neoliberal view. I think something that had, you know, for many years, especially in the United States, that dominated academic discussion and the rise of new classical and neoclassical economics was the focus on, again, the atomistic view and the static view of comparative advantage versus the importance of dynamic comparative advantage and the notion of imperfectly competitive industries. If you just look at which companies are dominating the landscape now, particularly in the United States, with the likes of Facebook, Amazon, right, Microsoft, Apple, these are imperfectly competitive industries. And so the some of the you know, I think disproportionate focus on competitive markets according to the Arrow-Debreu, Walrasian general equilibrium is a little bit misplaced for development purposes. If you could, just in my last few minutes, I wanted to point out, I think it's been a little bit underreported in the United States, this rise of neoliberalism. How did it come about? How did it win the day? At the end of the day, I look at the period of, you know, 1970, late 1970s to about 2010, when I noticed that things started to change, and including international organizations such as the Growth Commission, headed by Michael Spence, they started to note there were some concerns with the excessive focus on neoliberal policies after about around in 2010. So for a 30-year period, really, from 1980 to 2010, the rise of neoliberalism shaped government policies, academic circles, and I find it very dangerous. So, you know, as a PhD economist, like many of you who did this, we certainly appreciate many aspects of neoclassical economics, and we needed to learn it, and it should be in our toolkit. But I think it's very dangerous that there was essentially a complete departure from the contributions of institutionalism that's why I joined a society called New Institutional Economics, because it's trying to bring back certain aspects of institutionalism to the model. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Milton Friedman's Free to Choose, but in the United States, I really cannot overstate the importance and how Friedman is so articulate. He was so articulate, and think about it, on a national public radio, national PBS, public broadcasting, is a taxpayer funded program in the United States. Okay. And that program was given to Friedman to espouse many of these important economic foundations. And while, again, I think Friedman contributed a lot, and I think he's wonderful in many ways, but I think this is an example of how neoliberalism rose to prominence, because not only was neoliberalism elegant mathematically in academic circles, but then it also rose to power in conservative governments such as Reagan and Thatcher and company. There was the failure of the Keynesian models with the Phillips curve in the 1970s. And then Friedman brought it to the average American through this program on TV. And there was a key policy paper many of you know called the Washington Consensus. And then finally, I'm going to stop in the next minute here, but there's another section of the paper where I go into detail about the education, particularly the college and undergraduate and graduate level textbooks in the United States. And clearly it's starting to change. I'm happy to note that there are some positive changes with more pluralism in economics coming about, sometimes led at the grassroots level by student organizations, which I think is wonderful. But the undergraduate and graduate level textbooks, and I even went back and looked at high school textbooks in social studies, economics, and civics in the United States, and there really isn't much in terms of acknowledging the complementary role of industrial policy and government as being complementary instead of being combative in America's long-run economic development story. So I will leave it there. There's serious consequences if we don't clarify the story. I think it's a moral imperative for the citizens of the United States and elsewhere to understand the difference. I think Chang did wonderful, wonderful contributions. People like Chang and Ulick and Cohen and DeLong, for example, and Reinhardt, all these people did wonderful contributions in bringing more awareness to this issue. But there's still concerns that international organizations such as the IMF and WTO are very much influenced by those neoliberal policies. As I said, there is hope. There are student movements called Rethinking Economics. There's the new consensus that is developed after 2010 from the World Bank. That's the Michael Spence organization. And also, perhaps there's going to be more reliance on data and empirics to aid with long-run economic development strategy in the future. Thanks so much, guys. I'll take any questions.
For participation, we complete the 8th session. Thank you very much. Evet, 10. oturumumuzu başlatmak üzere. Ulusal ölçekte önce Endüstri 4.0 dönüşümünü moderatörünü davet ediyoruz. Vitesse Mustafa, Avrupa Orta Doğu Afrika Bölgesi Proje Direktörü, GTS Grup. Kendisi burada mı?
Hello, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay. IBM CTO Dr. Ben Amama. TÜBİTAK uzmanı Sertaç Kanlı Yerlikaya ve Endüstri 4.0 İnovasyon Stanley Black and Liquor Direktörü Eren Yılmaz.
Merhaba herkese.
Hoş geldiniz.
Hello.
Moderatörü Sayın Vitesa Mustafa burada mıydı?
Yes, she's here.
Yes, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear.
We can start.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Leading Industry 4.0 National Scale session of SEPIP conference. So as you mentioned before, my name is Vitesa Mustafa, and I will be moderating this session today. In this session of SEPIP conference, we will take three perspectives on how to lead, scale, and scale the Industry 4.0 vision on national scale. This topic is particularly interesting because it is the convergence of technology, business leadership, policy making, and so on. So luckily, we have today three guests from leadership, technology making, and policy making. So we will have perspective and triangulate this important topic. So first, we will have Sertaç Yerlikaya. She is strategist of TÜBİTAK TÜSİAD, and she is expert and technology strategist in digital business models. She will help us cover the policy making side of our topic. Welcome. We then have Ben Amaba, who is currently IBM CTO for industrial sector. Ben is globally recognized thought leader in industrial technology, and we will be getting his insights on future of technology and implications on scaling Industry 4.0. Welcome, Ben. And also we will have Eren Yılmaz, who is currently Director Industry 4.0 for Stanley Black & Decker's company. Eren is a recognized thought leader in Industry 4.0, especially with his innovation and contribution to literature for his research and development portfolio of his new to the world Industry 4.0 solution for one of the most biggest global companies in the world. First, we will start with Ben. So Ben, as a technology leader, how do you see the next challenges for policymakers as AI, IoT, and 5G becoming more mainstream and change the role of the competition?
Yes, you know, that's very interesting because we've been studying it around the world for economic development. And what we do believe that's out there is that there's actually four layers for countries and nations or institutions to actually advance in economic development. Those four layers are: one is the people. What we've discovered in the people in the roles, in order for economic development, it's got to include industry, government, and academia. That's the first layer. The second layer is what we call the laws of science. And that laws of science, which is changing the world almost instantaneously, is composed of two laws. Moore's law, that we are all aware of, that the computing power is growing exponentially. But what sometimes we forget on economic development, even if the power in Moore's law continues to improve exponentially, there's a second law that's actually changing the dynamics of not only institutions and worlds. The second law is Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe's law is that through networking, academia, government, and industry on a global basis, economies will grow. For example, the cell phone, which IBM had in 1991, called the Simon, didn't actually launch very well. The problem is, although we were increasing the capacity of computing power, the ability to connect to other individuals, i.e. other mobile phones, the value of that technology wasn't there. What mobility today and Apple and some of Facebook's, Netflix, or whatever economic institution you're looking at, they've been able to implement the second law. Like this networking event today, we're actually connecting. So no matter how big the processing power on the video is, unless we connect, we can't create economic development. The third layer is actually characteristics. I call those characteristics that are occurring today the 3 I's. That's becoming more interdisciplinary, which I've heard through the session of the conference, integrated. And when you actually integrate and then become more interdisciplinary, that's when innovations truly come to the country. So you've got 3 I's: interdisciplinary, integrated, which produces innovation. Now, here's the stumbling block or challenges that everybody wants to know. And that's that 4th layer that inhibits a lot of people. That is going to be data and process, talent, and trust. We talk about big data and everybody talks about data, but it's not only the data, but it's the process in using that data. Data cannot stay stagnant. It's got to go through 3 evolutions in order to create economic wealth. The data becomes information. And again, information isn't an island by itself, but it's got to be converted into knowledge that we can all act on. We can be passing information during this conference call or a Zoom call, but unless that information is turned into knowledge that we can act on, it's really still back at its static state of data. The 2nd and 3rd part of the 4th layer is talent. One of the benefits of academia is bringing up the tides of talent. When the tides of talent all rise, all boats rise. And the final one, especially in artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, or even in certain instances, Industry 4.0, there's a thing called trust. Do we trust the assumptions, the models, the algorithms, much less the data? But if we can get through all 4 layers, again, it's the people, the laws of sciences, the 2nd layer, the 3rd layer, characteristics, the 3 I's, and then the 4th layer, overcoming the challenges of data and process, talent, and trust, you're going to see economic development.
Perfect. So most of the next question will be in regards to the most of developing countries, especially the mid-sized countries like Turkey. It has lack of found long-term research of technologies such as 5G and quantum computing. So what do you recommend to policymakers in order to support research-intensive and technology development then?
Yes, especially what we're seeing in small and medium accounts is there's always time, talent, and treasure. Treasure is generally the most visible area that you see there, but it's not the only component, right? There's still time and talent. And what we've seen from small companies and why large institutions may fail or large economic countries might fail, they forget about the time and talent. When you actually shrink, it's called Little's Law, shrink the time and talent, meaning you've got higher talent in a compressed time, you can actually overcome the treasure component. Now, that's not with saying that you need some kind of injection, some initial capital to get going. But we do find historically, even with treasure and you can control time and talent, you can actually compress or not need as much injection into the treasure component of the 3 legs of the stool. So what I would recommend for small, medium nations is actually connect, collaborate, and focus on the time and talent, and the treasure will eventually be generated in certain things that we've all heard, like agile methodology. So the original capital and expense that many countries thought they had to have might be set by the time and talent.
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing. And now we will start with you, Eren. So you are leading innovation of Industry 4.0 for one of the world's biggest manufacturing company. So how do you see the state of Industry 4.0 globally?
Yeah, so I think we should start with putting into a kind of a framework. So I look at the state of Industry 4.0 from the evolution of the concept itself since its inception of 10 years ago, the progress we made globally in terms of technology development and implementation, and also the technology outlook and how the concept is expected to evolve, or the scenarios about how it will keep evolving. So looking at the last 10 years, I think the biggest failure of Industry 4.0 and the ecosystem is that the meaning of Industry 4.0 is still unknown. So we know which technologies are there, and it is presented as a catalog of technologies, but no one really knows what it is holistically. And I think when you look at the definitions of Fourth Industrial Revolution or Industry 4.0 in particular, 3/4 of the definition goes to what previous 3 industrial revolutions were about. And when it comes to fourth industrial revolution, it's presented as a catalog of technologies. And here, one observation I made is the maybe a very important but latent difference of fourth industrial revolution compared to the previous 3 is that it is the only revolution which was declared in a trade show. So this really, I think, explains a lot about why the real meaning has been lost in the last 10 years. Looking at the origins, it was about agility and resiliency and flexibility, whereas currently Industry 4.0 is being known or presented as a productivity tool set with spot solutions, not even solutions, actually products, which really doesn't lead to anything transformational. So having said that, looking at the progress, I think the progress is still small given the emphasis and the rhetorical, popular propaganda around how important it is. So the main reason for that is most companies really doesn't have the resources and not in terms of monetary resources, but also from the leadership, engineering, and development resources to really do hard transformational work. But instead, the progress is limited to small spot projects. And I personally don't see any new improvement that will resolve this problem in the short term, but obviously people will understand something is not working and something is wrong with whatever being preached everywhere. But looking at the progress in the national terms, I would like to denote 2 cases. One is the case with the United States, where the manufacturing industry is getting more traction and more emphasis across the ecosystem. And I believe we will see obvious signs of United States manufacturing industry coming back in the next couple of years with really obvious impact on the global trade and global manufacturing ecosystem. But looking at the real hard progress, I think China is leading the curve, and we see all the good practices and yeah. Hey, can you go me? Yeah. So looking at the China, I see many good practices, and companies are approaching this Industry 4.0 transformation from a longer term vision perspective and have much closer ties with the supporting ecosystem there. And it is not only the implementation, but also the technology development there. It's really leading the curve. Also from the outlook perspective, last but not least, the technology outlook perspective, I see 2 important things. One is, so far, as I said, this Industry 4.0 was presented as a catalog of individual technologies. And one of the pieces people were missing was, what about combinations of these technologies? What about the convergence? So this convergence is about to come, okay? And it's going to blindside many people and technologies in the coming years, especially around IoT, blockchain, 5G, and AI. These 4 offers lots of very disruptive combinations of technologies that would really shake the boat and disrupt the market in the coming years. And in a similar vein, I see some disruptive technologies emerging, such as, and mostly on the 2 ends of the spectrum. One end is the edge computing, where we do computation, storage, all these things at the where our assets are or where our people or things are. And there are some interesting technologies kind of getting proven and getting ready to scale out. These are embedded SIMs or embedded virtualizations that would really disrupt the so far cloud-centric technology progress we made. And on the other end, I think quantum computing offers a lot, but the issue with that is still it is very hard to get some good technology guidance from the vendors as to what to expect and when to expect in the coming years.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for sharing. So I wanted to see and to hear more around the challenges. So what are the biggest challenges at scale Industry 4.0 and that drives adoption?
Yeah, I think we can group it under three components. First is, of course, scarcity of talent. It's around qualified leaders, engineers, and developers. It is a cross-cutting issue across the world, and it is not a matter of cost. I mean, even if you are ready to pay above market averages or above market rates, it's hard to find those people. So it's a pure scarcity issue there. And I think the second big challenge is the cost of initial investment requirements or cost of initial infrastructure requirements, because most of the use cases or the transformation requirements of Industry 4.0 really require some upfront investment, which really doesn't have an attractive ROI, okay? So it is both big in terms of the budget and investment magnitude, and also the marginal returns are quite low. So that is, I think, is an entry barrier or an adoption barrier to many companies. And the third, I would say, really the limited capacity of the ecosystem. So across the world, there are so many big companies, big consulting companies, but their capacity and in some cases, the capability to deliver something tangible is very limited. And for companies like Stanley Black & Decker, which has 150 factories, I mean, no single company has ever the capacity to support big scale projects. So, and along those lines, I think, again, this is along the lines of ecosystem. But not from the capacity standpoint, but from the offering standpoint. I think the biggest problem there is the ecosystem is offering products, but market needs solutions. So that gap is a huge gap. So no one has ever have capacity, frameworks, tools, methods to solutionize those individually offered products, which are siloed products. And implement them, let alone put them into a structured roadmap and deliver in an agile, friendly manner and drive phased impact. So I would say these three are the main challenges that really hamper the adoption.
Great. At the beginning, I mentioned that technology, business leadership, and policymaking will be the main topics that we will be discussing around. And the third question for you, Aaron, will be what kind of policies would help address these challenges that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I've been in the previous meetings and listening to the technology, the policymaking part, and in my consulting past, I got involved in various policymaking projects, including the 11th development plan of Turkey. So I think there are a couple of issues there. First is the speed of hard technological progress is far greater than the speed of policymaking, okay? So all those frameworks we have seen today are so slow. They are, I mean, imagine the number of people, decision makers, stakeholders that has to get involved and come up with something tangible so that you can execute on it, right? So that's why I think across the globe, all countries, all governments are lagging behind technological trends. And they are basically chasing the curve and react what's happening. And sometimes in the case of United States, they react in irrational ways. So having said that, I think since I'm not a policymaker, I don't want to deep dive into what policies should be implemented, but I think I can talk about the meta policies or how they should look like. So first is I think they should be simple and focused on a few things instead of so many things and stretch resources thin and confuse people. So being simple and focused are, I think, the primary attributes of what would help. And second is really being focused on execution. And it is not normal, average execution. I'm talking about excellent execution, excellent field execution. Because in my past consulting work, I know that our policymakers or in other countries, policymakers and consultants consider meetings, workshops, conferences, and presentations as policy outputs. So this is not acceptable. We need hard, tangible progress in the field. I mean, I'm talking about field execution that is that can have measurable impact. So again, when saying measurable, I'm not talking about assessment or evaluation. So we should define which needle we are going to move and measure it transparently. Otherwise, it will be just waste of time and waste of taxpayer money. But one important thing I don't want to miss out is most policy frameworks or direction is focused on capability building, subsidies, incentives, etc. But again, since the hard meaning of Industry 4.0 is still kind of absent, I think this also inflicts some damage on policymaking side as well. And here, for countries like Turkey, which is a peripheral production center, and there are a few similar countries in the world like Poland, Romania, Turkey, as a periphery of the European market. We have Mexico at the periphery of the United States. And I think the main competition during this transformational period will take place among markets, big markets and consumption centers, which want to onshore production. The second is the legacy production centers such as China, Saudis, which want to keep their edge over onshoring or reshoring trends. And in between, we have peripheral countries like Turkey. And I think one important thing which is usually missed out there is logistics. So I think we should do more about protecting and developing Turkey's logistics advantage over offshore production. So, for example, I personally am very interested, find it interesting to see that Turkey is a part of this new Silk Belt initiative of China, which really helps China to export more to European market and export faster, which really, I think, compromise Turkish producers' edge in European markets. So I think it is, to summarize, it is really not about all technology. We should think holistically and don't miss out geopolitics and logistics.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Adam, for sharing. As we know, pandemic has reshaped everything, almost touched everything within industry. So I will continue with you, Sertaç. The next question will go for you. So how did pandemic has affected technology transformation?
I would like to say good afternoon, good evening for everyone, and I would like to thank to invitation for this fruitful conversation and panel. As you said that COVID-19 has affected this technology transformation. COVID-19 began as a health crisis, but now it is a global economic crisis. Over 37 million cases have been confirmed and more than 1 million people have perished. and countries have been subjected to lockdowns to control the virus, and this triggered economic crisis and affecting social consequences. Currently, almost more than 500 million are at risk of falling into poverty. And lately, UN Industrial Development Organization has announced that they are forecasting 8.4% fall in global manufacturing value in 2020. So in order to overcome the impact of market shutdowns on lives and livelihoods, governments announced trillions of dollars of response packages, and they are still deploying new ones. There are lots of structural shifts in national, regional, and global economies ongoing. Fortunately, technology became a critical part of the response to the COVID-19 crisis. Fast data exchange and processing provide a dynamic picture of the virus that is crucial for controlling the spread. Digital platforms, big data sharing made it possible for researchers to collaborate for vaccine and medicine developments. 3D printing made it possible to produce ventilators, spare parts of other medical devices where and when needed. Besides destructive effects of lockdowns, it also fueled the tech-enabled contact-free economy, such as online retailing, social distancing, delivery, and logistics, and they boosted new employment areas. Telemedicine legislation has been accepted in many countries, and most probably new businesses will be coming on top of that. Global organizations such as OECD, World Trade Organizations, IMF, all are working on resolving cross-border data policy, which will enable new tech solutions as well. NGOs are working on common paths, blockchain platforms to reopen international borders and allow traveling while ensuring their citizens' health. Thanks to video conferencing platforms, they are enabled to work from home, education from home, and conduct these valuable conferences such as today. Treating the Industry 4.0 or digital transformation and on top of that sustainability as nice to have been backfired by COVID-19. In a couple of days, all the world digitally connected. This is what many consultants like us or experts, even with incentives from governments, couldn't achieve for years. The businesses that will prosper in a post-COVID-19 world are those that are already preparing for recovery by strengthening their technology and enabling processes accordingly with these new technology areas.
Yes, so my next question will be, what will be the new roadmap for Industry 4.0?
Thank you again. COVID-19 has become an accelerator for digital transformation, and re-evaluating insights and mega trends are crucial because we need a new roadmap for Industry 4.0. Because digital transformation after COVID-19 is different than before. Online education is different than having online classes on top of physical schooling experiences, or working from home from day one is different than having an office or preferring working from home for a couple of weeks. And work efficiency requirements also have been changed. While we are using technology fundamentally to overcome this crisis, the intensive applications are also causing some risks and challenges. Before COVID-19, as other colleagues has been mentioned, there were two main decision issues for business and policymakers to start Industry 4.0 implementations. First one is cost of initial investments were high. So how to finance the Industrial 4.0 investments and how to prioritize from which technology to start was main issue, because as also previously mentioned, there are lots of technologies, lots of catalogs to this Industry 4.0 area. And the second issue was black factories were given as an extreme example for Industry 4.0 solutions. So how to close skill gaps and how to handle layoffs due to robotization or automation was the main problem. So Previous roadmaps were mostly focusing on addressing these issues. But with the pandemic, it's proof that the businesses need to reorient towards new approaches. Global value chains have traditionally been optimized for cost competitiveness reasons. But we have seen that in pandemic, it didn't work. Cost competitiveness was not enough to survive. So risk competitiveness is coming a new approach for the optimizations. Therefore, we need a new roadmap to cover all the new issues for Industry 4.0. During COVID-19 pandemic, the importance of developing stronger business continuity plans, designing flexible, robust, and simple operating systems re-emerged. Therefore, embracing full supply chain and logistics visibility, which is together with blockchain and industrial IoT solutions, making data-backed decisions and predictions again with IoT and big data analytics solutions, increasing agility in production processes with AI and 3D printing became more crucial, and leveraging automated processes like advanced robotics, human-machine interfaces, wearables, augmented reality, and automation softwares. These are all the areas which Industry 4.0 or the technologies which Industry 4.0 has been solving. So all these technologies have found new areas and got priorities during COVID-19 in the roadmaps. As again previously mentioned, these are not enough to prepare a successful business plan or road plan. Because we have new operating models, new governance models came with COVID-19. The operating models with agile people, remote processes, decentralized organizations, or digital collaboration tools, new leadership and governance models are on top of all the agendas for businesses, for the governments, and for the international organizations. And whole business, not only manufacturing, will be digitally transformed according to these new business operating models. And on top of operating models, building external partnerships became again very important because smaller suppliers have very small margins, so it is very difficult for them to survive. But large OEMs, in order to sustain their own businesses, they have to intensively collaborate with their suppliers to ensure that their business is not disrupted. Together with suppliers, strategic partnerships with peers and across the industries is also very important. This is for sharing the learnings, using the same supply chain capacities, or solving the problems like logistics, as mentioned before, logistics. The peer collaboration across the industries is very important. And global value chain is changing because reshoring, offshoring, businesses are trying to supply from close areas. So in order to be still part of global value chain, companies need to explore M&A opportunities to carry on with the Industry 4.0 revolution. Today, decision on prioritization of the projects for the new roadmap is maybe more clear on the technology side. We may have less constraints to find out which technology to start with. But those rapid rollouts and dramatic increase in the technology solutions also increase risks of infrastructure overloads and breakdowns. Cybersecurity and cyber crime issues have increased. privacy violations became a very important issue before it was expected. And inequality of the societies is also important. So managing those new risks became also key as it could lead to increased technology governance challenges. This requires industry players, technology providers, and policymakers to work more closely to ensure technology acceptance, also to ensure that everybody is included in this new roadmap. So this is to overcome the challenges, we need a better collaboration with all the parties.
Great that you mentioned, because my next question will be around the challenges. So you mentioned a couple of challenges earlier, and I would like to ask, what will be the new model of collaboration between industry, policymakers, and academia to overcome those challenges?
Mm-hmm. Previously, it was also mentioned that policy is coming very behind than the technology needs. It is still valid, and I think this will be a more important issue in the new area. To answer this question, we have to understand what will be the recovery and exit strategy from COVID-19. Through this pandemic, public expenditure has been critical to guarantee pay for workers, procure critical goods, and strengthen the health systems. So exit strategies will also depend on large public spending. So governments will continue to spend more on health issues, secure tests, and this finding the drugs and vaccination solutions. Therefore, concentrating on having concentration on the Industry 4.0 solutions, making manufacturing more center of the governments will be not easy. Therefore, public-private and academia partnership is getting more important in this area. In Turkey, I'm coming to the national, in Turkey, digital transformation centers for public, private, and academia partnership was organized, planned for industry districts. Having industry, model factory, and university in the same area, OSTİM is a very good example for that. Because it is not easy to find all three together logistically and combining the processes within these three is not easy. So OSTİM has a very good advantage on developing a partnership in public, private, and academia together. Currently, Fourth Industrial Revolution Center, together with World Economic Forum and Turkish Employer Association of Material Industry, has been established in Istanbul. This is one of the 9 centers in World Economic Forum all over the world. And this center is also aiming to develop policy recommendations to ensure that Industry 4.0 technologies implemented in line with the industrial technology strategies of the Turkish government. So when we look at the total investments in Turkey, there are more than 30 million Turkish lira projects have been completed for establishing digital development centers, and 400 million Turkish lira projects are ongoing. They are at the state of scoping, and they are already started to implementations. So this is a very important implementation. This is a very important investment for Turkish industry. In the new roadmap, industry players have to concentrate on external relationship, as I have mentioned in the COVID-19 evaluations. The industry players have to demand more areas to collaborate from their customers, their suppliers, and their peers. Their peers are mostly their competitors, but there are lots of areas they can collaborate and they can find solutions for their pinpoint areas. Any weak chain will be breaking all the value chain for the companies. Therefore, building external partnership is key for developing a roadmap. As operating models are evolving, more remote and more decentralized organizations is working perfectly in the new area. So these centers especially should work remotely, and collaboration areas should replicate this decentralized way of working. So not only the closed circle for companies or for universities or for public institutions, there's a good opportunity for universal collaborations with other countries or regional companies or industrial organizations. So this will create more value and this will create more innovation for our journey in the new industrial revolution. But it is not easy. This collaboration is not easy because it requires especially the industry players to be more willing to share their knowledge and their data with their suppliers, their customers, even their competitors. This will not be easy. This will be very important, but this has to happen. So I only see the way forward through open innovation. Actually, thanks to COVID-19, again, we have lots of tools and use cases to appreciate. For example, TÜBİTAK COVID-19 platform. There are 29 universities, 9 research centers, over 300 researchers, together with 8 big companies and tons of small companies, working together, sharing and developing together to find vaccine and drug in order to cure COVID-19. So these kind of collaborations can be replicated for industry. And this innovation, open innovation areas will define our success in the new area.
Thank you very much for sharing a great insight from you, Sertaç. So my next question will be actually for all of the panelists. I would like to know more around what lessons have you learned from this global pandemic when it comes, of course, to Industry 4.0, and we'll start with you, Ben.
You know, Industry 4.0 and the pandemic has actually taught us that things are still in play and things are modifying. It's a balance. When I listen to everything, I think 2 specific areas or disciplines still play, and it's changed the accuracy and precision of what we've done today, i.e. people talk about cost versus resiliency. But if you look back at Deming, Juran, and Crosby, whether it was externalities like disease, famine, or even war, it goes back to say, in order for us to evolve, improve, and raise the quality of life for everybody, it has something to do with the new economies. So Deming wrote a book called The New Economies. It's out there, and it was essentially reinforced in the same instances in history like we're seeing today. So I think Deming, Juran, and Crosby's principles play in today's world, meaning that if we were to look at everything, as Aaron also talked about in a lot of it, we don't want to be technology myopic, There are different rates of returns or cycles between policymakers and technology makers, but it's always encapsulated in their work. And what it captured, especially now with COVID-19 and Industry 4.0, is that 85 to 94% of the solution is actually found in the process, not the technology itself. And I know Aaron wrote a great article for the industrial and systems engineers where he talks about technology myopia, or being technical debt. We've got to start focusing on the process and the differences in the process. And those outcomes are going to actually let us bridge the externalities of COVID-19 and what we're really trying to get to in Industry 4.0 on solutions and outcomes. And I believe there's two corollaries to Deming's work. And he would mention, kind of abbreviated, we got to be smart. When I say smart, it's not just intellect, but SMART stands for something specific. Where do we collaborate? What do we contribute? And SMART to me is an acronym for being, let's be very specific, right? It's not all the way to the left. It's not all the way to the right. Let's start measuring, right, our milestones, tasks, and outcomes. Let's make it actionable, right? We don't need just data. We don't need just information, but we need knowledge, but it's got to be actionable. It's got to be reusable. If we can't reuse it between institutions, maybe it was, a blip of innovation that we can't actually transfer. And the final element in the word SMART in Deming's work is traceable, because what we all know is that although COVID-19 affects us and has affected us in the past 6 to 9 months, something else, another externality that we may not have control over, we might have to go back to our original hypothesis and then change that hypothesis moving on. So I believe even in the circumstances that is accelerating Industry 4.0, like COVID-19 or even politics or famine, that the principles of process and preventing something called the Utterback effect, where we get so technically myopic and not understand the different cycle times between technology, people, and policy, that we could get ourselves into a quagmire of complexities. Again, keep it simple, keep it concise, and keep it actionable. But I agree with the other two speakers. Where is that threshold, and how can we react to each threshold that gives us challenges?
Thank you very much, Ben, for sharing. Eren, the same question for you. So we know you work for a great company, global manufacturing company. And what lessons have you learned from global pandemic and when it comes to Industry 4.0?
Yeah, I think it helped many of us, not in our company, but also in our ecosystem, also in the broader manufacturing community, global community. I think everyone once again understood the importance of flexibility of reshuffling your demand mix and your supply mix, rearranging your capacity, and maybe re-architecting your supply chain in days' time, not weeks. So that speed of flexibility, I think, had proven out how valuable it is in times of crisis like that. That affects supply chains directly, not only from the logistics side, but also from the supply and also the demand side. So I think that was in one of the illuminating contributions or opportunity I see with this COVID-19 crisis, that it helped many people to question actually the cost leadership strategy is really fragile. And as you become more excellent at that, you become prone to losing the flexibility. And it's always good to focus on resiliency in parallel and account for agility and flexibility as really hardcore comparative strengths. And apart from that, I think we haven't seen the impact yet, but the whole psychological impact of COVID-19 on individuals and societies in general really changed our approach to life, our consumption patterns, habits, etc. Not only the way we perceive those things, but also kind of cast us into a new mode of consumption and living, right? And this new mode, I think, pushed many people to their next level of environmental awareness, or push them to question their consumption habits, value of owning things, etc. Really became less of a value when you can just consider yourself dealing with a fatal disease, right, every day. So I believe this might be the bottom wave of a new global trend, but it's early to consider this as a trend now. But I think this will really have an effect on consumer habits, and again, will test how and why flexibility and agility is really important as a strategic strength for companies.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Aaron. So, Sertaç, we will tackle this challenge with you as well. So what lessons have you learned from this global pandemic?
Actually, I would like to add to Ben's and Aaron's comment on this challenge. Processes was important other than technology, because technology is there. You need a process to use it, to define this process to use it, and you have to be flexible enough to use this process with the other players. And this COVID-19 challenge has showed me for this one, the collaboration and the players may come together and find a solution if they are use only their strengthening muscles instead of trying to make everything by themselves. The manufacturing of ventilator was a good example for that. We have manufactured ventilator in 5 days in Turkey. It was an entrepreneur company with TÜBİTAK support, developed a prototype. It was one of the biggest white good producing company, plus engineering companies working in other sectors. They came together, they used their strengthening muscles, and they made ventilators manufactured in 5 days. Before COVID, it would not be easy even to organize a meeting to discuss the topic altogether. But with COVID, all these applets, let's say, left, and companies come together to drive the solution, to deliver the solution. It was a very good example, and there are many examples like that. And I believe if we carry out these experiences after the COVID, we can achieve very good results in Industry 4.0 journey in Turkey, together with other developing countries and developed countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone sharing their challenges and discussing around the of the business and every company itself. Working remotely is now very normal. It was not before, but now it's very normal. So thank you very much for sharing your challenges. If you have any questions or to add something between, please feel free to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting and organizing this, and we're very honored to participate. So again, a wonderful venue, and again, thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, likewise.
Likewise, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure hosting and moderating the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Utesa.
Thank you.